The new Gate started as a revolutionary VR MMORPG, granting players unprecedented freedom in their adventures. However, it abruptly turned into a deadly battle, trapping players in the game with no means of logging out. Those who perished in the game faced the same fate in reality. On an open field, a group of skeletons engages players in combat. As the skeleton soldiers claim the lives of several players, a girl finds herself on the brink of defeat until a mysterious man gallantly comes to her rescue. Despite her curiosity about his identity, he remains focused on dispatching the skeletons. He's a determined player, relentlessly fighting in the hope of ending the game's deadly grip. Some time ago, he left behind his comrades to pursue this mission, promising to return. However, he found himself embroiled in a fierce battle against a formidable boss. Despite its massive size, the boss strikes swiftly, forcing the player to dodge with precision. Though he attempts to deal a fatal blow, the boss evades, sustaining only minor damage. Refusing to succumb to desperation, the player regains his composure. He observes the boss's HP regenerating and wounds healing, prompting him to take decisive action. With resolve, he charges towards the boss, determined to disrupt its regeneration. He attempts another lethal strike at the boss, but the boss manages to block it, staggering from the force. Seizing the opportunity, he delivers a devastating blow. Although hopeful for victory, the boss begins to heal once more. Determined to end the battle decisively, he prepares for a final, monumental attack. Empowering his sword, he charges at the boss, leaping into the air and delivering a crushing blow that reduces the boss to dust. With the boss defeated, the game system acknowledges his triumph and grants him new titles. It announces the possibility for players to log out now that the dungeon is cleared. Feeling accomplished, he checks if other players are logging out globally. However, he discovers that he is the sole remaining player on the online scroll. Shin, realizing he cannot log out, witnesses a massive gate opening behind him, suggesting he has completed the game. As he is absorbed into the game, he awakens in a remarkably lifelike grassy plain. Puzzled by the realism, he questions if he's truly in the game world, considering the limitations of VR technology. Upon examining his increased stats, he realizes something extraordinary has occurred. He deduces that his inability to log out is a result of defeating the final boss, indicating that he has completed the game. Despite this, he finds that the logout button is missing from the game's screen. Attempting to check the online scroll for other players, he discovers that he's not connected to the game network. Perplexed by his ability to move without network connection, he realizes that the game world has become his new reality, causing him a moment of panic. However, he quickly resolves to maintain composure, understanding that panicking won't assist him. Utilizing an item that guides him back to his home base, he follows its lead. En route, he notices new structures along the roadside, prompting him to question when they were erected. Upon reaching his base, he witnesses a group of bandits coercing an elf girl to reveal her master's location. When she refuses, they forcibly drag her away from the base. As the elf girl crosses a barrier, triggering a colossal guard monster, the bandits flee while the creature menaces the girl. Reacting swiftly, Shin intervenes to confront the monster, realizing that he can adjust the potency of his magical ability, though physical exertion taxes him. Shin is astounded by the immersive realism of the game's world as they re-enter the base. The elf introduces herself as Tiara and inquires if Shin is acquainted with her master, SSS-Rank. Confused, Shin racks his memory for any recollection of the name. Suddenly, a memory surfaces. SSS-Rank was the name of an elf support character from the game, and Shin describes her appearance to Tiara. Seeking SSS-Rank's whereabouts, Shin presses Tiara for information, but she hesitates due to suspicion. Instead, she offers to convey a message to her master for a fee of 1,000 jewels. Having only jails in his possession, Shin retrieves them from his item box, surprising Tiara, who notes that only esteemed individuals possess such boxes. She further reveals that jails hold significant value, contrary to Shin's memory of them being lesser currency in the game. Puzzled by Shin's identity, Tiara learns he's merely an adventurer who chose the high human species at the game's start. To Shin's shock, Tiara informs him that high humans vanished 500 years ago during a period known as the Dusk of Prosperity, an event unfamiliar to Shin. Tiara explains it was a time marked by widespread disappearance, leaving Shin intrigued by this revelation. Shin connects the dots, realizing that the mass disappearance might coincide with the time when players trapped in the game vanish. It dawns on him that the world he's in now exists 500 years post-game events. Tiara brings Shin back to the present moment, and he expresses gratitude by offering her the one jail as a token of appreciation for her insights. Tiara declines the gift, deeming it imprudent to accept something of such value from a recent acquaintance. Shin assures her she need not return it, and Tiara, touched, reluctantly accepts it, relishing the opportunity to hold such a precious coin. Shin explains the utility of the jail coin for an elf like her, but Tiara is astonished that Shin can discern her elven heritage. She confides that she wears an illusion spell cast by her master to conceal her identity, as black-haired elves are considered omens of misfortune, leading to her expulsion from her village. However, her master intervened, rescuing her and providing sanctuary for over a century. Shin wonders if the curse can be lifted, prompting Tiara to reveal that her master is currently seeking a solution. Tiara confides in Shin that she's resigned to living in secrecy, but Shin ponders whether her hair has always been black. She reveals that her hair used to be silver until she was cursed, which caused it to turn black. Determined to help, Shin brainstorms potential solutions and realizes Tiara can be cured. He accesses his skill menu, prompting Tiara's curiosity about his actions. Using his Analyze skill, Shin discovers that Tiara possesses the cursed gift, the source of her perpetual monster attacks. Although Tiara believes mere identification won't cure the curse, Shin employs his Purify skill to heal her. As the skill concludes, Tiara questions whether it failed. Shin reassures her that the skill was successful, although only part of her hair reverted to silver. Surprised, Tiara rushes to inspect herself in the mirror. Despite the partial transformation, she sincerely thanks Shin for alleviating part of the curse, expressing gratitude for glimpsing her silver hair after a century of waiting. Moved by her gratitude, Shin suggests Tiara attempt to leave the barrier, assuring her of his protection against any monster threats. Though initially hesitant, Tiara decides to trust Shin's words and steps beyond the barrier, taking a leap of faith into the unknown. They traverse through a nearby forest until they reach a grassy plateau, where Shin informs Tiara that her curse has been lifted, evident from the absence of monster attacks during their journey. Overwhelmed with joy, Tiara sheds tears at the sight of the beautiful sky once more. Returning to the base, she expresses heartfelt gratitude to Shin for his assistance. As they await Tiara's master's arrival, she wonders about Shin's plans. He decides to explore a nearby town in search of his other support character and to familiarize himself with the new game world. Tiara provides him with a letter of instruction to present to the kingdom he spotted on his way to the base. Explaining that the letter will allow him to bypass the inspection line, Tiara jests about entrusting valuables to a stranger, but Shin accepts it graciously as a token of gratitude for helping her lift the curse. Promising to notify him upon her master's return, Tiara bids him farewell as he departs for the kingdom. Upon reaching the kingdom, Shin is surprised to find that the letter of introduction grants him the privilege of skipping the inspection line. He marvels at its significance, with the guard escorting him emphasizing its potential to secure an audience with the king. Guided to the Adventurers Guild, Shin plans to gather information and registers as an adventurer. To his surprise, he encounters the same person he met at the front door, realizing that she is the twin sister of the guild worker named Celica. Celica introduces herself and instructs Shin to pay an application fee and fill out a form. After a considerable wait, Shin finds himself sitting in the guild, surprised by the lengthy process of obtaining a guild card, which takes almost a day. Observing the other adventurers, he notices their modest weapons and armor, realizing they are of lower quality compared to those in the game. Unexpectedly, Celica approaches Shin, expressing gratitude for his patience. She offers him a snack and joins him, encouraging him to taste it. However, Shin becomes uneasy when he notices Celica's gaze fixed on him. She explains that she wants to confirm something, prompting Shin's curiosity. Celica inquires if Shin possesses a letter of introduction from his base, expressing the need to verify its authenticity in another room. Agreeing to the request after finishing his snack, Shin expresses reluctance to meet the guild master so soon. Nonetheless, Celica reveals that the peculiar man from reception is, in fact, the guild master. Identifying himself as Barlux, the guild master leads Shin to a private room. Requesting to see Shin's identification letter from the Moon Sanctum, Barlux places it alongside another letter on the table, causing Shin's letter to emit a faint glow. Barlux confirms the authenticity of Shin's letter, surprising Shin with the thorough verification process. Curious, Barlux inquires about the source of the verification letter, and Shin mentions Tiara as the provider. Barlux realizes there might have been a lapse in Tiara's explanation regarding the verification process, leading to Shin's surprise. Explaining the significance of the identification letter, Barlux emphasizes its vulnerability to theft due to its crucial role. He advises Shin to dispose of the letter if he cannot ensure its safety. However, Shin assures Barlux of his capability to protect it, earning Barlux's approval. Deciding to test Shin's skills, Barlux leaves him exhausted by the end of the day, as he reflects on his plans to raise his rank and await Shni's return to the base. Disappointed upon waking up the next day, Shin heads to the guild where Celica greets him. Noticing his changed attire, Celica hands him his guild card and explains the 9 ranks, ranging from SS to S through to G. She explains to him that he can increase his rank by completing tasks and earning points, adding that he's eligible to undertake tasks 2 ranks higher than his current one. When Shin presents a job involving harvesting hillgrass, she approves it as a suitable task for him. Leaving the guild, Shin embarks on a search for hillgrass but struggles to find any despite hours of effort. Nevertheless, he finds solace in knowing that low-rank equipment is effective against monsters, allowing him to continue his search at a leisurely pace. Suddenly, his sensor detects a nearby monster, prompting him to investigate. Upon encountering the monster, Shin realizes it's of a high level and possesses formidable strength. Despite this, he decides to confront it, only to find his attacks ineffective against it. Surprised by the undead monster wielding a light weapon, Shin removes his limit and delivers a powerful blow that destroys the monster's core in a single hit, causing it to collapse. However, Shin is disappointed as the light sword, which he desired to replace his broken one, disappears into oblivion. Nevertheless, he retrieves a gemstone dropped by the defeated monster, gaining a better understanding of how things operate in the game world and anticipating the fun ahead. Meanwhile, the light sword mysteriously lands in the king's castle, leaving the king's guards bewildered about its origins. This brings an end to our episode. If you enjoyed it, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel for more anime recaps. The knights contemplate what to do with the sword, and Lady Ryan proposes getting an appraiser to examine its composition. She also suggests investigating who launched the sword into the castle, realizing the launcher must possess significant power. Meanwhile, villagers watch with surprise as wounded soldiers return from their expedition. Shin is curious about what happened to them, and a knight informs him they were attacked in the northern woods by Skullface. Shockingly, only 4 out of the 12 soldiers survived. Shin connects the dots, realizing the soldiers were victims of the wreckage he witnessed in the forest. Additionally, the knight mentions that witnesses saw a sword fly out of the forest and crash into the castle, fortunately without causing any harm. Suspecting Shin might know something, the knight questions him. Shin insists he was merely harvesting hiltgrass and pledges to relay any pertinent information he comes across, as he's the one investigating the case. Shin silently feels sorry for burdening the knight with extra work but is relieved that no one was harmed by the sword. Returning to the Adventurers Guild, he's warmly greeted by Celica. Shin explains that he's there to make a report and wonders if the town's disturbance was linked to Skullface. Celica reveals that an urgent request for extermination was issued due to the incident's proximity to the castle. Curious about Shin's report, she listens as he tells her he defeated Skullface Jack and presents the gem the creature dropped, surprising Celica. Shin describes Skullface's peculiarity, mentioning its ability to shatter his sword. Celica interjects, cautioning Shin that such monsters are formidable foes. Shin, feeling crowded, asks her to respect his personal space, puzzled by her astonishment. Just then, Els enters, advising Shin not to tease her partner. She's been informed about him by Celica, who now shares the news of Shin's victory over Skullface Jack. Although surprised, Els hears Shin explain that he lacks proof, as he didn't bring the creature's armor due to its unimpressive nature. Els explains that Shin can't access the gear without the proper rank, expressing surprise that Shin, who claims to be an adventurer, isn't aware of this. She expresses interest in examining the gem to check for traces of the Skullface's mana. Celica tells Shin they'll be borrowing the gem for this purpose. Shin questions if Skullfaces are common in the forest, to which Els explains that undead are created when mana merges with the grudges of the fallen. She mentions the high death toll in the forest due to monsters, creating ideal conditions for undead. Els clarifies that the mana level of the area shouldn't be sufficient to spawn a Skullface, leading Shin to realize the rarity of the occurrence, especially given that the Skullface was level 359. Surprised by this, Celica decides to hasten the gem's appraisal and asks Els to cover for her at the desk. Shin is impressed that they can determine the monster's strength through appraisal. Els reassures him that he's as strong as a rank party, given his ability to defeat the monster solo. Shin pleads with Els to keep the information about his strength a secret to avoid drawing unwanted attention to himself, and Els assures him she'll maintain his confidentiality. Shin heads to a restaurant and is surprised to see Celica working there, as he didn't anticipate her employment at the establishment. Celica guides him to a table, where he sits, albeit feeling somewhat awkward dining alone. Suddenly, Avis enters the restaurant, capturing everyone's attention as he approaches Shin's table. Shin notices he's carrying the legendary magic spear named Venom, known for its formidable abilities. Avis joins Shin at the table, and Shin introduces himself. Avis inquires if Shin is a new adventurer, to which Shin reveals it's only his 3rd day in the profession. Observing Shin's equipment, Avis remarks it suggests more experience than a newcomer. Shin explains he's not familiar with the usual standards around the castle area, as he's from elsewhere. Understanding Shin's perspective, Avis realizes why Shin didn't react fearfully to his reputation. Shin wonders why people are intimidated by him, prompting Avis to explain he's known as Avis the Vampire for his expertise in hunting undead creatures. Shin initially thought the nickname referred to Avis's complexion, but Avis clarifies it's because venom possesses the drain ability, which absorbs its victim's life force and transfers it to the wielder. Avis harbored concerns that venom might drain his life force unexpectedly. Silica returns with their meals, and they eagerly begin eating. The following day, Shin visits the library, feeling a sense of nostalgia as it's been a while since he last visited one. Hoping to discover something new, he picks up a history book about the kingdom from the shelf. Upon reading, he learns that the kingdom was established approximately 511 years ago, coinciding with the time of the mysterious disappearances. Intrigued, Shin decides to delve deeper into research and discovers that the people in the world he now inhabits are the same as the characters in the game. With his curiosity satisfied, Shin leaves the library, having absorbed all the knowledge he could from the books. Barlux convenes a guild council meeting, announcing the defeat of the Skull Face by the hero adventurer and the examination of the returned gem. The knights express surprise that the Slayer didn't take the Skull Face's armor, deeming it unimpressive. Upon learning that the Skull Face was confirmed to be level 359, Barlux expresses relief at having this information clarified. However, he ponders whether similar monsters are present in the area. A knight reports that soldiers have already been dispatched to investigate, and they anticipate receiving further details the following day. Barlux is aware that Skull Faces are typically active during the night, so he instructs the knights to remain vigilant after dark. One knight expresses curiosity about the unusual weapon wielded by the Skull Face, and who defeated it. Barlux allows discussion about the weapon but respects the Slayer's wish for anonymity. The knight seeks clarification on whether the appearance of the strange sword in the castle is linked to the defeat of the Skull Face. Barlux wonders about the nature of the sword, and the knight reveals it to be a blend of magic steel and mithril, enchanted with light elements. Realizing its potential, they speculate that the sword may rival their nation's royal sword in power. Recognizing the sword's legendary status, Barlux understands the knight's curiosity about the Skullface Slayer. The knight then reveals there's some trouble brewing, prompting concern. Meanwhile, Shin sits by a fountain feeling disheartened by his difficulty in gathering information. As he eats steak, he notices a beast girl watching him and offers her some food. Observing her tiger-like appearance, Shin wonders if she's lost. However, she surprises him by expressing gratitude for the food. Introducing herself as Millie, she appreciates Shin's kindness. Shin introduces himself to Millie and mentions that he's heading home due to the late hour. Curious if Millie is also heading home, she informs him that Avis is coming to pick her up. Shin is surprised to encounter Avis again and wonders if Millie is his child. Avis clarifies that Millie is an orphan from the church but has a knack for sneaking out, and he's responsible for bringing her back. Avis is amazed that Millie has taken a liking to Shin, as she's typically shy. Though Avis intends to take Millie home, she pleads with Shin to help save some foxes in the northern woods. Eventually, Avis escorts Millie home while Shin ponders over Millie's request. He questions why she sought his help but decides to assist since he has no other plans until Shni returns. Recalling a means to contact Shni, Shin resolves to give it a try. The following day, he visits the Moon Sanctum and apologizes to Tiara for forgetting to leave a message earlier. He hands her a sword, instructing Tiara to notify Shni to find him if she recognizes the weapon. Tiara recognizes the sword as an ancient weapon, and Shin identifies it as the Blue Moon, belonging to Shni's world. He explains that only he, Shni, or those they authorize can wield it. Recognizing its immense power, Tiara expresses reluctance, fearing it could overwhelm her. As Shin delves into the sword's composition, he notices Tiara struggling to comprehend and apologizes for overwhelming her. Concerned about Shni's memory of him, Shin entrusts Tiara with the sword and letters to reach him upon Shni's return. He explains the mail system to her, but she questions why he can't directly contact Shni. Shin recounts his failed attempt the previous night, prompting Tiara to question the effectiveness of the items. To test it, Shin steps outside, and a mail promptly appears in front of Tiara, confirming its functionality. Shin deduces that the mail's delivery depends on whether he's met the recipient in the new world or not. Tiara requests a few letters from him, and Shin agrees, as he has some to spare. She explains her aspiration to become a mage and study magic items. In return for delivering his message to Shni, Shin decides to give her some letters. Leaving the Moon Sanctum base, Shin ponders whether Tiara should send one of the letters to her master. Heading to the northern woods, Shin finds himself uncertain about how to save the foxes upon arrival. Despite attempting to venture deeper into the forest, he encounters an impenetrable barrier. and hears a voice urging him to leave. Surprised by the mental interference despite his enhanced resistance, Shin interprets it as a warning of formidable opposition ahead, prompting him to press on. Arriving at a shrine, the mental interference dissipates, leading Shin to believe the shrine is the barrier's focal point. Upon entering the shrine, he discovers a wounded fox lying within a magic circle. Finding no traps, Shin rushes to aid the fox, realizing its dire condition. Upon healing it, another barrier breaks nearby, revealing undead soldiers. Determined to prevent further casualties, Shin engages the undead soldiers with his magic sword. However, he is confronted by two new adversaries as fox statues atop pedestals suddenly transform into towering golem foxes. Shocked by their appearance and their formidable level of 674, Shin faces their magical attacks, noting the erratic behavior caused by their aura. Shin resolves to contain the foxes to prevent them from causing further harm. Employing shadows, he immobilizes them, but they retaliate by creating a smokescreen that inadvertently harms the injured fox he is trying to rescue. Faced with the fox's aggression, Shin hastens to end the battle, only to realize his shadow manipulation has waned. Preparing to unleash his full power, Shin is redirected by the injured fox towards the magic circle it occupied. Relieved that the smokescreen did not affect the magic circles, Shin capitalizes on this, prompting the foxes to notice as well. Despite their charge, he ensnares them with magic chains and delivers a decisive blow with his magic spear. With the miasma dispersed, Shin examines the features of the small fox, identifying it as an elemental tail. Surprised by its diminutive size compared to others of its kind, Shin decides to make it his companion. Meanwhile, Shni receives a magical letter from Tiara, prompting her curiosity about how Tiara obtained such an item. Upon opening the letter, Shni is taken aback by its contents. Shin heads back to the guild to report the unexpected appearance of numerous skull faces. Concerned about the guild learning of the fox, he decides to form a partnership with it to conceal its identity and level, ensuring they can remain together. The fox agrees, and they initiate the partnership with a contract. Shin chooses the name Yusuha for the fox, which pleases it. While contemplating the fox's name, Shin receives a notification from Tiara, informing him of her success in communicating with her master, Shni. Surprised by this development, Shin replies, asking Tiara to convey his greetings to Shni. Accompanied by Yusuha, Shin arrives at the guild and encounters the twin sisters at the reception desk. They encourage him to report his findings, with Celica insisting she should handle it. Celica is puzzled by Celica's behavior, noticing her unusual demeanor. Celica insists that she shouldn't handle Shin's report, and Celica agrees, allowing Celica to take charge of it. Shin shares his report with Celica, feeling relieved to have expressed himself. Afterwards, he heads to the request board to explore other job opportunities. While browsing the requests, Yusuha draws his attention to a unique one seeking a skill successor. Shin ponders the meaning behind this request, noting its unranked status and origin from the church orphanage. Intrigued, he decides to accept the request, coinciding with his plan to visit Millie at the orphanage. Upon arriving at the church orphanage, Shin admires its architectural beauty and encounters a nun, who questions his presence. Apologizing for his distraction, Shin explains his purpose and expresses interest in Millie's whereabouts. The nun confirms Millie's presence and leads Shin to her room. Millie warmly welcomes Shin, while the nun observes Shin's genuine demeanor, contrasting with her previous impression. Surprised by Millie's fondness for Shin, the nun apologizes for misjudging him. Shin introduces himself as an adventurer, and the nun, named Traya, reciprocates with her own introduction. With Traya's permission, Shin seeks clarification from Millie about their earlier conversation regarding the fox. Millie confirms that Yusuha was indeed the fox she wanted him to save and expresses gratitude for his help. However, Shin credits Millie for providing the crucial information that led to Yusuha's rescue. Curious about Traya's request, Shin begins to inquire. Recognizing his interest, Traya acknowledges that Shin likely possesses a skill, given his curiosity. Shin admits to having a skill, explaining that while common in the game, skill holders are now rare. Traya explains that she seeks to learn a specific skill, and needs someone with the inherited ability to teach her. Shin assumes she needs a healing skill, given her role in the church, but Traya clarifies that she desires the purifying skill for reasons beyond her profession. Shin is surprised by this revelation, and Traya acknowledges that her request is demanding. She asks if he would be willing to teach her the skill, to which Shin responds that it depends on various factors. Traya interprets his response as referring to the reward for the request, but Shin clarifies that he seeks information about Millie's abilities in exchange for his services. Additionally, he requests any relevant information the church may have. Aware that Traya may not readily share such information, Shin anticipates negotiation. Shin decided to approach Traya to utilize the church as a source of information, recognizing his lack of knowledge about the new world. Millie speaks highly of Shin's character to Traya, leading her to accept his terms. However, she informs Shin that their ability to gather information is limited because they lack expertise. Shin reassures Traya that he simply wants to be notified if anyone shares anything noteworthy at the church. He expresses a greater interest in learning about Millie's abilities. Traya reveals that Millie holds the title of Star Composer, granting her accurate visions of the future. Shin realizes that Millie possesses precognitive abilities. Concerned for Millie's safety if her powers were discovered, Shin learns that precautions have been taken to keep her abilities hidden. Traya mentions an adventurer named Avis who assists in safeguarding Millie. Shin accepts the request but wonders if Traya herself will be learning the skill. Traya explains that she intends for one of her sisters to learn the skill, as their former priest has a granddaughter who would inherit the church smoothly if she acquired it. While the children show affection to Yuzua, Shin feels disappointed that none of them show similar interest in him. He notices Millie's absence from the group and learns that she refrains from interacting with Yuzua due to the fox's larger size. Yuzua suddenly rushes towards Shin, prompting Millie to call her over to keep the fox company. Shin realizes that Millie likely used her powers to attract Yuzua to her. However, when he tries to greet the children, they disappear quickly. A child approaches Shin, expressing hope that he might be the one to save them from the authorities' plan to shut down the orphanage. Shin asks for more information, and the child explains that the church needs a new priest, and Traya cannot take over because the successor must possess a special skill. Shin understands that this is why Traya wants to learn the Purify skill. The child adds that the former priest's granddaughter could claim ownership of the church if she learns the skill. Now comprehending Traya's motives, Shin wonders why the church's priest would want to close the orphanage. The child reveals that the priest is disliked because of his focus on money, providing Shin with insight into the priest's character. Millie assures the children that Shin will be their savior, which comforts the child. Shin asks the child if Millie is always accurate in her predictions. The child shares that Millie's predictions have been reliable in finding good deals and hidden treats, although that wasn't Shin's inquiry. Shin concludes that Millie should be cautious about what she reveals to others. Millie questions if she's using her powers strangely, but Shin reassures her that she's using them for positive purposes. Shin affectionately pats Millie on the head, prompting all the children to seek head pats from him. Traya emerges from the church, expressing gratitude to Shin for waiting, but she finds him surrounded by children using him as their pillow. Traya instructs Lasha to introduce herself to Shin, but Lasha stumbles over her words, leading Shin to inquire if she's alright. Traya explains that Lasha is a bit clumsy despite her diligence. Shin informs Traya that he'll be teaching Lasha the Purify skill, and emphasizes that her success in learning depends on her efforts. However, Shin decides to inquire if Lasha knows where large numbers of high-level undead creatures tend to appear. Traya mentions that the Ghost Plains is renowned for its abundance of high-level undead. Just then, Avis bursts into the room to discover that Shin has taken on the task. Avis expresses curiosity about Shin's intentions. Shin admits that he seeks information about Millie's power and the adventurer who helps conceal it. Avis realizes Traya has divulged a lot and advises her to be cautious, but she trusts Shin based on Millie's confirmation. Avis questions if Millie had a vision, and Traya confirms it. Reluctantly, Avis agrees to trust Shin because of Millie's trust in him, and Shin assures him of their secrecy. Avis warns Shin that he'll take action if any secrets are revealed, but Millie chides him for being overly cautious. Traya apologizes for Avis's brusqueness, and he asks Shin to explain the Purify skill. Shin describes the process, explaining that defeating 200 undead creatures above level 150 with a Holy Prayer Orb item is necessary for purification. Shin plans to weaken the monsters while Lasha deals the finishing blows. He mentions already possessing a Holy Prayer Orb, a rare item. Avis decides to accompany them to ensure Lasha's safety, and Traya encourages Lasha's efforts. Although Avis is unfamiliar with Shin, he trusts Millie's judgment, though he harbors doubts about Shin's ability to handle the task. Shin leaves the church, intending to rest early for their journey the next day. However, Avis interrupts him, asking him to join him to confirm if Shin is a chosen one. Shin is perplexed, and Avis explains that chosen ones possess skills, titles, and knowledge beyond normal acquisition. Shin ponders if they also have memories of past lives, but Avis clarifies that they have information about items and monsters. Shin contemplates the concept of reincarnation in the game, recalling his previous experiences but noting that he didn't start anew as a baby in this world. Avis observes Shin's pensive demeanor and decides to cease his inquiries, cautioning him to maintain secrecy regarding chosen ones. Shin admires Avis's caring nature, and protective stance towards the orphanage, finding it ironic that people dislike him. Avis explains his efforts to oppose the new priest due to the children's distress, which causes him discomfort. Despite this, Shin recognizes Avis's kindness and stifles a laugh. However, Avis notices Shin's amusement and prepares to confront him before Shin receives an urgent message from Tiara. Tiara informs Shin of SSS-Rank's imminent return and expresses anxiety over her master's inquiries about him. Shin receives another significant message and retrieves his introduction letter from the Moon Sanctum. Avis recognizes the seal and verifies the authenticity of Shin's letter, both surprised to possess letters from the Moon Sanctum. The following day, they reach the plains, and Shin passes the holy prayer orb to Lasha since she must hold it. Venturing deep into the plains, they encounter a sudden onslaught of undead. Shin encourages Lasha to give her best effort. As the undead close in, Shin takes them down to allow Lasha to heal, relieved to find that his skills function similarly to those in the game. Subsequent waves of undead attack, targeting their limbs for Lasha to eliminate. Continuing their journey, they encounter a barrier erected by the guild to shield against high-level undead. Avis explains the purpose of the barrier. Upon passing through, Shin notices enemies surrounding them. He assigns Avis to deal with those ahead while he handles those to their left, leaving Yuzua under Lasha's protection. They defeat the monsters to allow Lasha to heal them. Meanwhile, Ryan battles high-level undead in the plains, reflecting on the aid she received from a mysterious sword. She witnesses Shni rescuing a struggling soldier party from a massive undead threat effortlessly. Shani arrives just in time and swiftly defeats the monster within seconds. Afterward, she uses her healing abilities to tend to the injured soldiers, who express their gratitude for her timely intervention. Shani humbly attributes her success to the soldiers' efforts in wearing down the monster over time. One of the soldiers reflects on the recent surge of undead creatures appearing outside the Ghost Plains over the past month, despite efforts by elite units to contain them. He is astonished that Shani managed to defeat one of these monsters single-handedly. Recognizing her past connection to a high-ranking human, he acknowledges that such feats are expected of someone with her background. Shani inquires if they have encountered any more irregular monster, to which the soldier confirms that this was the last one. Despite this, Shani decides to continue scouring the area as a precaution and advises the soldiers to use the magic she provided if they encounter any further threats. She ventures into the forest, feeling content that her master has returned. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Wilhelm engaging in combat with a skull face, which he dispatches with ease. Lisha delivers the final blow, triggering a radiant glow around her. Shin explains that this glow signifies the fulfillment of conditions to learn a new skill. Once the glow fades, Wilhelm checks on Lisha's well-being, and she assures him that she's fine. She shares her experience of being flooded with images on how to use her newly acquired skill, identified as Purify by Shin. Lisha expresses her happiness, knowing that she can now use this skill to protect the orphanage. Shin suggests taking a brief break before returning to Beorling, but his attention is drawn to a dark mass of magical energy hovering in the air. Wilhelm identifies it as the source animating the undead, explaining that it absorbs the energy of weaker undead until they dissipate, eventually spawning a powerful skull-face lord. This new foe boasts an impressive level of 804, much to the surprise of Wilhelm and Lisha, who realize its destructive potential. Lisha reassures herself that they should be protected by the barrier surrounding the area, but Shin expresses doubts. The skull-face lord tests the barrier by striking it, causing it to crack, shattering Lisha's sense of security. As they attempt to flee, they find themselves surrounded by undead minions, leaving Lisha panicked about their next move. Wilhelm proposes breaking through the undead ranks to escape, but Shin decides to stay behind. He removes his limiter, determined to prevent further chaos now that the barrier has failed. Shin urges Wilhelm and Lisha to return to the kingdom while he confronts the monsters alone. Wilhelm is taken aback by Shin's resolve and newfound power, prompting him to inquire about Shin's true identity. Shin assures Wilhelm that he will explain everything later, instructing him to take care of Yuzua and Lisha. He casts a physical buff on Wilhelm to enhance his speed, intending to help him escape faster. Although Wilhelm attempts to take Yuzua with him, she refuses to let go of Shin, prompting Wilhelm to leave her in Shin's care. Shin then clears a path for Wilhelm to escape before turning his attention to the undead. In the midst of the battle, Yuzua assists Shin by utilizing Fox Fire. However, the Skull-Face Lord emits another deafening roar, causing the undead Shin previously defeated to be replaced by new ones. Recognizing the challenge ahead, Shin employs a skill called Thunderstrike to eliminate some of the undead. Shni notices the glow from this skill and heads towards its location. Afterward, Shin consults his map, noticing it teeming with monsters. He acknowledges that having Shni by his side would provide more strategic options for attack. He spots a blue marker approaching him on the map, indicating an ally. Realizing who it is, Shin moves towards the marker and reunites with Schnee amidst a picturesque field of flowers. Despite his attempts to speak, they are soon surrounded by undead. Yuzua shields them using her barrier. Schnee embraces Shin before he can articulate his thoughts, inquiring if he has something to say. Shin apologizes for leaving her and expresses gratitude for her care of the shop, but he senses this is not what she wants to hear. Instead, he reassures her that he is home, to which she warmly welcomes him back. Schnee confesses she had doubted Shin's return, prompting him to reflect on the fact that he expected the game's end to erase his saved data, including the Moon Sanctum, Schnee, and his other companions. Yuzua's power runs out, prompting Shin to suggest dealing with the monsters before continuing their conversation. Proposing a combination attack, they execute a spell called Sanctuary. While this heals Yuzua and eliminates the weaker undead, the Skull-Face Lord remains unscathed. Shin then swiftly cuts the Skull-Face Lord in half with a single sword strike. Before perishing, the Skull-Face Lord unexpectedly speaks, asking Shin to bestow upon him his power. Surprised by the monster's speech, Shin assures Shiny that he is fine, although he admits to not learning anything about the monster in the end. Deciding to chat for a while, Shin and Shiny move to another location. Shin recalls how Shiny had sent him off to defeat Origin, and confirms that he did so. However, despite defeating Origin, huge doors appeared in the dungeon boss room, causing him to lose consciousness when they opened. When he woke up, he found himself in a field, realizing that he had traveled 500 years into the future. SHNI expresses surprise upon hearing this, and informs Shin that the dungeons have completely vanished. When other players' support characters began reporting that their masters had disappeared, she deduced that Shin had cleared the dungeon. However, it puzzled them that they remained in the world when they should have vanished along with the players. Thus, they decided to search for their master. The seismic shift caused chaos on the continent, leading them to split up to work separately. SHNI returned to the Moon Sanctum, aligning with Shin's research findings. Shin then requests Schnee to refrain from addressing him as her master, fearing it might attract attention if someone overhears a legend like her addressing him in that manner. Schnee, uncertain how to address him now, is asked by Shin to simply call him by his name. Though embarrassed, SHNI complies, and Shin appreciates the change. SHNI then inquires about Shin's plans. He mentions his intention to visit the sacred site he read about in his research at the kingdom's library. When he asks if she has been there, SHNI confirms she has, but only for a cursory investigation, unaware of its interior. Shin decides he'll have to explore it himself. SHNI wonders if Shin will leave once he finds a way back to his world, to which Shin affirms. SHNI admits she knew he would say that. Shin then asks how much she remembers from when their world was just a game. She recalls everything from the time they descended into this land until the end. She mentions becoming more self-aware around the time they turned it a death game, noting that before then, it felt like she was watching a video, or observing from above. Shin reflects on Schnee's awareness of their imminent disappearance upon the players logging out, and ponders what they all must have experienced at that time. Schnee reassures Shin that they wouldn't have troubled him with such information, and emphasizes that they were not entirely autonomous back then. Even if they wanted to, they couldn't have taken any action. Learning about their self-awareness now, Shin admits to second-guessing everything. Schnee acknowledges that Shin would have fought regardless, reminding him of their promise. To uplift the mood, Schnee suggests putting an end to the sad talk and having a celebration once they return to the Moon Sanctum. Before that, she asks about the identity of a little fox accompanying Shin. Shin introduces Yuzua as his partner, explaining that she is an elemental tail. Schnee discerns Yuzua's uniqueness upon seeing her tails and confirms her suspicion when she notices Yuzua now has 3 tails. Yuzua greets Shin good morning, surprising him with her ability to speak. Yuzua attributes her newfound ability to her head clearing up when the black substance disappeared. Shin realizes that the shrine was also surrounded by skull faces, and deduces that the lord he defeated earlier must have been their leader. Concerned about maintaining secrecy, Shin advises Yuzua not to speak in front of others. Yuzua wonders if she can communicate with him telepathically. Shin agrees to Yuzua merging her 3 tails into one to maintain discretion around others, and Yuzua complies. Impressed by Yuzua's cuteness, Schnee expresses her desire to pet her. As she pets Yuzua, Schnee acknowledges Shin's knack for surprising her, noting that no one in the game has ever tamed an elemental tail, except for him. She recognizes Shin's unique capabilities, stating that unlike the previous element tail they encountered, Yuzua has a lower level. Shin explains the difficulty of weakening an elemental tail, emphasizing the need to remain vigilant around such monsters. He decides it's time to leave, having sent his companions ahead. Schnee suggests they hurry to catch up with them, and Shin agrees, expressing a desire to prevent their companions from reporting their encounter to the guild. Schnee remarks that they could have postponed their conversation if Shin had informed her sooner, but Shin confesses that he couldn't wait to speak with her after seeing her face. They depart, leaving Licia and Wilhelm elsewhere. Licia expresses concern for Shin's safety, but Wilhelm reassures her, citing Shin's strength. Suddenly, they notice something rapidly approaching them. Initially fearing it's a monster, they realize it's just Shin and Schnee. Wilhelm asks Shin not to surprise them like that again. In another location, Ryan investigates the aftermath of Shin's battle with the Skullface Lord. Her soldiers report that they couldn't find any traces of the incident. They explain that after hearing a mysterious voice, the horde of Skullfaces vanished, and a light emitted from the area healed their soldiers. Puzzled by the events, Ryan wonders who might be responsible. One of the soldiers presents her with a sword found at the bottom of a fissure. He explains that the sword was engraved at the end of the fissure, and suggests it might have caused the crevice. Uncertain of the skill behind it, he points out a falcon emblem on the hilt, indicating it was made by a renowned blacksmith known as the Black Blacksmith. Despite its worn appearance, the soldier notes the sword's formidable power. Ryan is taken aback by this revelation. Rian is surprised to hear this. She mentions that the high humans are supposed to be extinct, and the soldier states that this is why he can't back up his theory. But it's clear that there is an extraordinary human around here who can treat weapons of this level as disposable. Rian then thinks that the Ebon blacksmith is supposed to be the owner of the Moon Sanctum, and she mentions that they should ask around after they get back to the kingdom. The soldier wonders what she is going to do if a high human has really returned, and Ryan states that she would like to have a duel with him. She mentions that she wouldn't mind marrying him either, and the soldier warns her to not think about slashing this person out of the blue. Ryan states that she is not that unreasonable, and the scene cuts to Wilhelm asking Shin to explain himself. Shin wonders why he is being so confrontational, and Wilhelm mentions that Shin did come here with Schnee Razor, who never bows down to anyone. He wonders what happened, and Shin tells him that Schnee defeated the Skull-Face Lord. Wilhelm then points his spear at Shin, and he mentions that he did notice Shin exert some unbelievable magic, and he asks him to stop acting like he did nothing. He states that Shin must have wreaked havoc back there, and Shin wonders how Wilhelm knows this. Wilhelm then becomes angry and starts attacking Shin relentlessly, but Shin successfully avoids all of his strikes. Wilhelm demands that Shin stop fooling around and explain everything, so Shin reveals that he is a high human and Schnee's master. Wilhelm believes that Shin's immense magical power is now understandable, and Shin clarifies that he had restrained his power during their previous encounter. He then inquires if there are any remaining records about high humans, to which Wilhelm confirms that they know high humans were incredibly powerful and possessed exceptional skills. Some people have their own legendary tales about them, and Shin worries that revealing his identity could cause trouble. Shin then reveals his occupation as a blacksmith and offers to reforge Wilhelm's spear, allowing him to customize it however he likes. However, Wilhelm declines the offer. Licia wakes up and is surprised to see Shin there. She expresses relief that he is safe, and Shin informs her that he managed to escape the situation somehow. Licia then notices Schnee, and Schnee introduces herself to her. Licia is surprised to learn about her identity, and the group continues their journey back to the kingdom. Shin informs Wilhelm that they will part ways upon reaching the gate, and Wilhelm is fine with this, as their only request was for him to obtain the necessary skill. He clarifies that anything happening in the church is no longer his concern. Eventually, they arrive at the kingdom's gates. Shin offers a message card to Wilhelm for emergency contact, but Wilhelm declines, stating it won't be necessary. He explains that involving Shin further would complicate matters, and Shin understands, but still insists Wilhelm take the letter. Shin expresses his inability to rest, knowing he hasn't done all he can, and he mentions his commitment to his first friend and the children he's protecting. He urges Wilhelm to accept the letter without further embarrassment, and Wilhelm departs after taking it. Shiny then remarks to Shin that he hasn't changed, noting that he's always been this way. He never boasted about his strength and always protected the weak. The two of them arrive at the Moon Sanctum, and Shin expresses his hunger. Shiny suggests they have dinner together, and Tiara joins them. She excitedly informs Shiny that someone wants to meet her, but notices she's already with Shin. Shin explains that something has happened and suggests they eat first. Tiara is surprised that Shin will be dining with them and wonders why. Schnee reveals that Shin is actually the owner of the Moon Sanctum. Tiara finds it hard to believe and remarks that Shin must be the legendary high human. Shin reminds her that he mentioned this before, and Tiara thought he was joking. She apologizes for being so familiar with him, but Shin assures her not to worry. Tiara wonders if he's not going to kick her out, and Shin confirms he won't. Shin then tells her about Yuzua being an elemental tail who can speak, which surprises her even more. Later, the three of them have dinner, and Tiara remarks that she's never seen these dishes before, noting that Shiny seems to be going all out. She notices an aura emanating from their food and wonders what kind of ingredients Shiny has used. Shin explains that the fruits are Idea fruits and topaz pears, the vegetables are blood radish and kalama onions, and the meat is from thermal lion and orc king. Shni explains that she chose the best ingredients available for the occasion, although she didn't have time to prepare anything elaborate. Shin realizes she could have made something even better. Tiara remarks that the ingredients they mentioned are high-end and almost impossible to acquire. Shin questions if this is true and asks Shni about the aura Tiara mentioned. Shni clarifies that it's the residual mana, or life force in the ingredients, often visible when preparing food with powerful monsters or rare plants. They all enjoy their meal. Shin learns that the support characters have moved on to live their own lives. Shiny explains that they understood it was best not to worry about Shin. Shin agrees, not wanting them to search for someone who might not be around. Shiny adds that even if they did, it would be their choice. Tiara tells Shin he worries too much, appearing a bit intoxicated. She mentions seeing two of her masters, and Shin asks Shni if she's lightweight. Shni admits she's never seen Tiara like this and puts her to bed. The scene shifts to Shin in his room, where he notices Yuzuha is already asleep. He also goes to sleep, but wakes up at night feeling something heavy on top of him. Realizing it's not Yuzuha, he discovers Shni sleeping next to him. Concerned, he notices she's crying and calling for him. Shin wipes her tears, though he doesn't understand their significance, and apologizes to her. In the morning, Shin wakes up to find Yuzuha has transformed into a girl. Embarrassed by her nudity, he hastily tells her to cover up. He offers her clothing typically worn by element tails in the game, assuring her it will adjust to her size. Yuzuha puts it on, and they head outside. Shni is surprised to see Yuzuha's transformation, and the four of them share breakfast. Later, they converse, and Shin questions Yuzuha about why she was at the shrine. She explains she found it the least uncomfortable place to be inside. Shin then asks if she recognizes the symbol drawn inside the shrine. Yuzuha responds that she doesn't recognize the symbol. Shin considers that it might have been something meant to alleviate symptoms and provide comfort. He then inquires if Yuzuha knows anything about a significant number of people disappearing 500 years ago. Yuzuha explains that she doesn't, as visitors are rare. When asked what she was doing at the shrine, Yuzuha recalls initially napping in the sun until the ground began cracking and the winds picked up suddenly. This woke her, prompting her to prevent further ground damage. Shin concludes that it was likely a natural disaster, and Yuzuha's efforts were to mitigate its effects. He speculates that as element tails can control all elements, she likely intervened uniquely in this situation. Yuzuha shares that her exertions left her injured, leading her to seek refuge in the shrine, where Shin eventually rescued her. Shin credits their timely arrival to Milla's guidance. Yuzuha expresses her intention to thank Millie again, prompting Shin to propose bringing her a gift. Shiny suggests keffel, an elven baked treat made by Tiara, which has become a top product at their store. Tiara admits to selling some on a whim, despite the Moon Sanctum not being intended for food sales. Shni reminds Shin that they can't replenish supplies without him, as he's the only one who can access the armory. Shin announces his intention to craft a few swords later to restock their inventory, prompting Shni to suggest discussing something important. Curious, Shin inquires about the topic, and Shni reveals her desire for Shin to meet Gerard. Shin expresses surprise at Gerard still being alive, considering it's been 500 years since the Dusk of Prosperity, and high beasts like Gerard typically have a lifespan of 150 years at most. Shni emphasizes the urgency, noting that Gerard likely doesn't have much time left and is eagerly awaiting Shin's arrival. She reminds Shin of Gerard's past accomplishment of uniting the various beast tribes to form the Farn Beast Alliance. Shin recalls Gerard being known as the first Beast King, and Shiny adds that the current king, the eighth one, possesses all the military might and leadership ability, allowing Gerard to await Shin's arrival peacefully. Acknowledging the importance of meeting Gerard, Shin decides they'll travel normally since Gerard isn't in immediate danger. He inquires if they can leave the following day, to which they confirm. Tiara offers to watch the shop as usual, but Shiny insists on joining them, stating that with Shin's return, they no longer need to be particular about staying in one location. Tiara expresses confusion about Shin's statement, prompting Shin to explain that they will be taking the shop with them. However, Tiara still doesn't grasp the concept. Shin reassures her not to worry and suggests it would be beneficial for her to travel with them since she can finally leave her current location. Tiara agrees, and Shin suggests they start preparing, emphasizing the need for supplies. SHNI adds that she will report about the Skull Face Lord to the capital first. Shin plans to visit the guild after crafting some swords and look for a job in the direction of Farnet to rank up. SHNI wonders where they should meet afterward, and Shin plans to inform her via a message card. SHNI proposes forming a party so they can use telepathy. Shin creates the party, and Shiny advises Tiara to register as an adventurer. Shin invites her to accompany him, and she agrees to change into suitable attire before leaving. Shin decides to wait for her while he forges swords, and they split up. The scene shifts to Shin at the forge, where he instructs Yuzuha not to touch anything due to cursed swords present. He begins crafting a sword, realizing he instinctively knows where to strike the steel, likely due to his skills. After crafting his first sword, he realizes it's too powerful and imbued with magic, making it unsellable in the kingdom. Shin attempts to craft more swords while restraining his power, and eventually produces several. Tiara arrives, and they head outside. Shin inadvertently stares at her chest, which Tiara notices. In jest, she makes Shin pay for everything as punishment, and they proceed to the guild. When the trio arrives in town, Tiara is amazed by how many people are around. Shin tells her that the crowd she sees is actually small compared to usual. She's only heard about crowds from customers at the shop, and her excitement is like a child's first visit to an amusement park. Shin suggests they complete their errands first so they can use the remaining time for whatever they want. Tiara loves the idea and eagerly grabs Shin's hand, leading him to the guild. He's happy to see her comfortable being outside, a big change from when they first met. Soon, she realizes she doesn't know where they're going, so Shin takes the lead. The elf notices they're holding hands and blushes. To Shin's surprise, he gets promoted to E rank despite not completing a single job. Celica explains they confirmed he defeated a high-ranking skull face and a horde of skeletons. She personally thinks he should have been promoted to rank A. Shin suspects the guild refrained from giving him a big level up to avoid causing a massive uproar. The receptionist, with a hostile tone, asks how he knows Tiara. Shin explains they are traveling together for mutual business and hopes Tiara can register as an adventurer and get a guild card. Celica bluntly asks about their relationship status. Both deny being a couple and are shocked to learn the receptionist knows about them running through the city holding hands. She explains that a beautiful lady like Tiara is bound to catch people's attention. Shin tries to steer the conversation back to business, asking if the guild has any information on sacred sites, places destroyed during the Dusk of Prosperity. Celica informs him that such information is restricted to those of rank B or higher. Shin plans to return for that information once he ranks up. He mentions he is heading to Farnet and asks if there are any jobs he could complete along the way. Celica pulls out a huge book and searches for jobs in the direction they're heading. A client named Nock needs a wagon escort to bear around, requiring up to 5 people and offering 10 silver coins per person. Shin likes the sound of the job, and the elf doesn't object. Celica tells them the wagon will depart that afternoon when the bell rings thrice. She also mentions that 2 adventurers have already signed up, so they should meet them. Since Tiara still needs to wait for her guild card and the wagon leaves in the afternoon, Shin suggests they wander through town and head to the church. Shin watches as the elf interacts with various vendors, trying new foods along the way. Eventually, they arrive at the church, where they meet Lassia, who stops sweeping to greet them. She and Tiara get acquainted, with the nun excited to learn that the elf is Rizar's apprentice. She eagerly asks for more details about Rizar. After Lassia's questions, they go inside, where Millie comes to say hello. The Beast Girl reveals that the orphanage will not be closed, thanks to Shin's efforts. Lassia adds that she will take over as the head of the church due to learning the Purify skill. The nuns are grateful for his help. Shin asks about Wilhelm's whereabouts and is told that the vampire is investigating the priest who was supposed to take over. Shin is sure the priest will not back down quietly, and needs to find out his motive for wanting to control the church. Before leaving, Shin gives the nuns and Millie amulets enchanted with various kinds of magic for their protection. The other kids hear Shin is around and come to greet him. They take a liking to Tiara and inundate her with requests to play. The nuns later apologize for the children's excitement. The elf admits she was unsure how to play with them since it was her first time. They return to the guild to collect Tiara's card. She finds it surreal that she's now an adventurer. Shin suggests they pick up the Moon Sanctum. The elf finds it absurd that he can carry his house around, but Shin considers it perfectly normal since he owns it. He jokes about how real estate agents would love such an ability. They stop in a secluded alleyway, and the elf is mesmerized by the beauty of the large, refined crystal he produces. She is astonished to hear that it's enchanted with a teleportation spell that instantly warps targets to a saved location. Shin proposes they use it to reach the Moon Sanctum faster. Tiara reveals that teleportation is a lost spell that no one knows how to use. Shin nonchalantly mentions he can make as many teleportation crystals as needed if he has the materials. Accepting that he's a legendary high human, Tiara just nods. They warp as soon as the coast is clear and instantly find themselves at the Moon Sanctum, which the elf finds strange but fascinating. Shin activates the storage mode, causing the structure to glow brightly until it disappears. He shows Tira a pendant, revealing that it's the Moon Sanctum in transport mode, which impresses her. With their errands done, they head to their job and arrive at Nock's wagon. Jin and Tsubaki introduce themselves as the other two adventurers who took the job. Their exchange of pleasantries is interrupted by Nock, who warmly greets them and expresses his hope for a safe journey to Baron. The merchant then takes the driver's seat and sets off. Meanwhile, the king holds an emergency meeting upon hearing of the Moon Sanctum's disappearance. The monarch is deeply troubled because the Moon Sanctum is a structure that survived the dusk of prosperity and prevented the strongest individuals and high-level monsters from breaching its barrier. It is a mystical shop made from lost technology, and its disappearance could become a multi-kingdom issue. The princess inquires about Rhizar and is informed that the elf is currently journeying to the castle. She suggests to her father that they wait for Rhizar's arrival since they lack sufficient information to act. The wise king agrees. Back on the road, Jin asks if Shin and Tira have ever taken a life before. The elf is a little confused, so Shin explains that it's not uncommon for fights to break out during escort missions. They are more likely to be attacked by bandits than monsters. Tsubaki mentions that people tend to underestimate her because of her small size, but she can still take them down. Shin is pleased to hear she can hold her own in a fight. While on the topic, he thinks it would be a good opportunity to find out what everyone is capable of in a battle. Gain goes first, revealing that he's a samurai by trade and a rank adventurer. He admits he's useless when it comes to magic. Tsubaki states that she's a boxer at E rank and can cast support spells to boost speed. Tiara introduces herself as an alchemist who uses a bow and sword, can cast simple healing spells, and is a G rank adventurer. Shin is the last to reveal that he's an E rank samurai who can cast fire and lightning magic. He also introduces Yuzua as his monster familiar. Gain is surprised to hear of a samurai who uses magic and suspects that Shin underwent some unusual training. Tsubaki wants to know if he's from Hinamoto, a nation built around samurai and shinobi guilds, where devoting oneself to battle is the culture. She names the guilds, and Shin is surprised to learn that an entire country was built around factions from the game. The wagon suddenly stops, prompting the party to face a bandit ambush. The leader demands the merchant leave all his money and cargo if they don't want to meet their demise. Shin calmly tells Nock to go inside the wagon and instructs Yuzua to defend him while Gain and he assess the situation. Since their attackers are few, the adventurers stand ready to fight. Tiara stays hidden, feeling anxious as she has never taken a life before. She spots other bandits hiding in the bushes. Meanwhile, Tsubaki catches the eye of one of the criminals, who makes obscene comments about her, enraging Shin. The elf gets worried when she senses his bloodlust, preferring the happier version of Shin. The leader reveals they have intel that the party mainly consists of E rank and lower adventurers, with the Dragnir being the only A rank. The bandits believe it will be impossible for him to fight while also protecting his weaker party members, confirming this is a targeted attack. Shin demands to know where they got their information from. The elf gathers the courage to take out the people in the bushes. The bandit leader orders his men to attack. Tsubaki defeats one bandit with a flashing vigor technique. As he falls, he realizes this isn't something an E rank should be able to do. Jin and Shin cut down the rest, leaving the leader stunned. This was supposed to be an easy job since they have magic swords, and their levels should be higher than the adventurers. Shin approaches and cuts the leader's blade before beating him mercilessly. They tie him up, and the high human demands to know where he got his information from. Shin is still livid, so Tira calms him down with a pillow hug, then walks away, leaving him confused. The elf gets embarrassed, explaining that her master used to do that to calm her down. She looks over at Shin, who is still ashamed. Shin asks Tsubaki to explain, but she has no clue what the elf's actions were all about. Tiara looks worried, so Shin reassures her that he only plans to reduce the shaking and improve the wheel movement a bit. He explains that this should make their ride much smoother. Tiara, half joking, asks if the wagon will fly or move without horses after his modifications. Shin assures her it won't, but she realizes that means he could make it happen if he wanted to. Tiara then asks which wagon they should choose. Shin says he'd like one big enough to sleep in. He spots a wagon of the right size, and Tiara agrees it looks perfect. Shin tells the store owner he wants to buy that one and mentions they will pick it up when they are ready to leave town. The owner asks if they have chosen horses yet. Shin says they haven't. The owner advises getting horses with strong legs and suggests buying two, as the wagon is too heavy for just one horse. Shin mentions hearing rumors about people using monsters to pull wagons, and the owner confirms this but notes that taming a monster is necessary. Shin thanks him for the information and leaves the store. He then receives a telepathic call from Shni, who informs him that she has finished her business in the kingdom. She asks where he is, and Shin tells her he just bought a wagon in Barium and now needs to find horses. Schnee offers to capture a monster to pull the wagon and says she'll arrive in Barium within a day. She asks him to wait for her there. Shin agrees and tells her to take her time. Schnee then mentions that the castle is very concerned about the sudden disappearance of the Moon Sanctum, which surprises Shin. Schnee mentions that everyone at the castle looked pale and adds that this might be good for them. She was getting tired of their constant flattery while they tried to observe and recruit her. Shin empathizes, noting it must have been tough, and he understands why any kingdom would want her for their military. Schnee reveals that one kingdom even tried to claim ownership of the Moon Sanctum, and she considered wiping out the entire nation. Shin guesses they thought having the Moon Sanctum would secure her loyalty. Schnee adds that some people even proposed marriage to her. Shin finds this plausible since he made Schnee incredibly beautiful. Schnee asks if he is jealous, and Shin admits he is a little. Schnee is pleased to hear this and tells Shin to let her know if he finds an inn for the night. Shin agrees. Later, Tiara is checking items at a local shop, and Shin suggests they look for an inn. The shop owner recommends a fine inn if they haven't found one already. The scene shifts to them at the recommended inn. They think it seems expensive but decide to book a room. The receptionist asks if they will be sharing a room, which embarrasses them, so they choose to stay in separate rooms. Shin remarks that the inn cost them half of their reward money, feeling incredulous that the shop lady recommended such an expensive place. Tiara explains that the lady probably thought adventurers could afford it, and adds that this inn is quite famous in Barium. When they see their rooms, they realize the high prices are justified. Yuzua then transforms into her human form, and Shin decides to use the time before dinner to maintain his weapons. While he's polishing his weapon, Tiara enters the room. She asks if he informed her master about their stay at this inn, and Shin confirms that he has. He mentions that her master will arrive in the city tomorrow, and Tiara suggests they get some rest until then. After dinner, Tiara plans to head to bed after taking a bath. Yuzua asks if she can join her, and Tiara agrees. Yuzua then drags her into the bath in Shin's room. Despite the distracting noises from the bath, Shin decides to be a gentleman and ignore them, focusing on his weapon maintenance. Meanwhile, Schnee is shown battling a monster in the mountains. The next day, Shin wakes up at the inn and tells Tiara he will work on the wagon until Schnee arrives. He asks Tiara about her plans, and she mentions she's curious about the modifications and will watch him work. The scene then shifts to Shin at the wagon store. Shin decides to start the modifications by altering the axles and installing springs to improve the suspension and reduce shaking. He completes this quickly and thinks he just needs to add ball bearings now. Tiara wonders if modifications always take so little time, and Shin realizes they should avoid drawing attention. He mentions he'll install the ball bearings in a more conventional manner, but then Schnee contacts him, saying she's beyond the North Gate. Shin tells her they will head there right away. He decides to rush the final modification, and Tiara notes his urgency. The scene shifts to Shin, Tiara, and Yuzua heading to the North Gate, sensing something unusual ahead. Tiara asks what they are sensing, and they tell her she will find out soon. They soon spot a giant Grifacio jade, leaving them all surprised. Shin notes that this monster usually has a maximum level of 650, but this one is at level 751. He explains that this one must be unique, as it has horns, which are uncommon. Shin mentions that this monster will pull their wagon. He asks Schnee where she captured such a beast, and she replies that it's from the nearby sacred mountain. Tiara thinks that Schnee loses all reason when it comes to Shin, and they notice the monster already likes Tiara. Shin observes that it must be a friendly monster and comments that they are stuck with it since Schnee has already tamed it. He asks why she chose this monster, and she explains that she knew the creature pulling Shin's wagon had to be of the sacred beast class. Shin points out that it's too big and will make them stand out. Schnee anticipated this and shows Shin that the monster can change its size. The monster shrinks, and Shin remarks that this size should be perfect. Tiara is relieved that the monster can shrink, and Shin comments that earlier it was intimidating enough to make people faint. He admits he never expected Schnee to bring something so high level, and Schnee wonders if she did something wrong. Tiara explains that most people would never consider having a sacred beast pull a wagon, and Schnee feels sad that they don't like her choice. Shin quickly tries to cheer her up, saying he's thrilled to have such a cool sacred beast pulling his wagon. Yuzua then talks to the sacred beast, and relays that it says they can count on him. Shin is surprised that monsters can communicate with each other and asks the beast's name. Schnee tells him it's called Shimmer because it can use illusion and thunder skills. The four of them then attach Shimmer to the wagon and ask him to take them to Farnet. As they set off, Shin feels amazed. Tiara notices the ride is smooth and not bumpy at all, and Schnee mentions it even outperforms the royal carriage. Meanwhile, Yuzua is chatting with Shimmer, and Shin asks what they're discussing. Yuzua explains that Shimmer is sharing his childhood story, revealing that he and his mother used to rule the sacred mountain together until an adventurer defeated his mother, leaving only Shimmer alive. This makes Shin feel bad, as he used to do similar things when this world was just a game to him. Yuzua continues, explaining that Shimmer ran as fast as he could and was rescued by an elven girl. He then worked hard to get stronger and return to the sacred mountain. Schnee wonders if this is why Shimmer let his guard down around her, and Yuzua says it's because Shimmer recognized a familiar scent on Schnee, Tiara's scent. Shin wonders if Tiara was the girl who saved Shimmer. Yuzua confirms this, and Tiara recalls that she did save an injured puppy when she was a child. Yuzua mentions that Shimmer says he met Tiara 100 years ago. Tiara realizes that Shimmer is the same puppy she saved back then. Schnee suggests transferring Shimmer's ownership to Tiara, mentioning that it shouldn't be a problem as long as both accept. Schnee then dissolves her contract with Shimmer, and Tiara forms a new contract with him. The process almost makes her faint, but Shin supports her. Tiara feels weak, and Shimmer worries, but she reassures him that she just needs a little rest. The scene then shifts to the group camping in the forest at night. Shin asks Schnee if she let Tiara have Shimmer to protect her. Schnee confirms, explaining that they can't always be by Tiara's side and she feels better knowing Shimmer is with her when she chooses her own path. Shin points out that Tiara can now summon Shimmer anytime she wants. Schnee tells Shin she'll always come running to him if he's in trouble. Shin thanks her, saying she's the only one he can rely on when things get really tough, which makes Schnee happy. The scene cuts to the group in southwestern Farnet, where they spot two beast men. Schnee mentions she sent a message to Gerard, and these must be his men. The beast men greet them, saying they are there on the orders of their first king. Schnee asks them to take the group to Gerard. Before leaving, Shin packs up the carriage in his storage, and Shimmer shrinks to a portable size. On the way, Shin asks if Schnee knows the two beast men, and she explains that they are Gerard's grandchildren. They arrive at the mansion and meet Gerard, who is happy to see his master again. Gerard says he never expected to see Shin again, and Shin replies that he didn't expect Gerard to still be alive either. Gerard admits he doesn't know why he's still alive and says they have a lot to discuss, but they should start with introductions. He introduces Shin to the current Beast King, Wolfgang, and his daughter, Kiro. He also introduces Van Ku and Rajendulk as his confidants. Shin then introduces himself to them as a high human. Gerard tells him there's no need to be so formal, and Shin explains that he's only being formal because Gerard is doing the same. Gerard says he's just having fun since they haven't seen each other in a long time, and this is the best way to put everyone else at ease. High humans are incredibly strong and are considered legendary beings to be feared and revered in this world. The scene then shifts to Shin and Gerard reminiscing about old times, recalling a tough battle they fought long ago. In that battle, they were surrounded by hundreds of monsters but managed to defeat them all after a hard fight. Shin says he thought they would die back then, and Gerard mentions he was surprised they made it out alive. They can't remember how many monsters they killed that day. Gerard then starts to tell Shin what he's been up to in the last 500 years. Shin says he already knows that Gerard founded a nation, and Gerard is surprised that SHNI spilled the beans. He says he was going to brag about it, but SHNI mentions that she knew Gerard would exaggerate, so she gave an objective account instead. She then goes to make some tea, and Gerard asks Shin to tell him what happened to him. Shin explains everything to Gerard, and Gerard understands why he couldn't find Shin despite searching for so long. Gerard says he's glad Shin is back and suggests they get down to business. He reveals that he doesn't have long to live and expects to die in about a month. Shin asks how he knows this, and Gerard explains that he's felt something off in the past few weeks. When Shiny told him about Shin's return, it confirmed his suspicions. He believes time has started moving for him again, like it was waiting for Shin's return. Gerard thinks the gods might have answered his prayers and asks Shin to duel him. Gerard wants to fight with all his strength, and Shin wonders if Gerard intends to die in battle as a warrior. Schnee overhears their conversation. Gerard explains that he wants to duel Shin, the strongest warrior, to test his own strength against someone superhuman. Shin accepts the challenge. Shin asks if Gerard has informed Wolfgang and the others about this. Gerard says he has told them about his limited time left, but not about the duel. He plans to tell them soon and believes Van and Rajam might have already figured out his intentions. Shin asks if Van and Rajam are Gerard's comrades. Gerard explains that they have fought alongside him ever since Shin disappeared. He mentions that they are the longest-lived beasts and have followed him all this time. Gerard feels it's time for the nation to be free of their influence. Shin comments that he's heard Wolfgang is a talented leader. Gerard confirms that Wolfgang is a great leader who listens to the people and walks alongside them. He says Wolfgang is a suitable replacement for him. Shin asks if Gerard has any regrets. Gerard admits that his only regret is not dueling Shin, and Shin understands. The scene shifts to Gerard informing Wolfgang and the others that he has found a place to die. He explains that since he doesn't have long to live, he has asked Shin to duel him. Gerard says the duel will take place in a week. Van and Rajam already anticipated this. Gerard expresses that his unfulfilled wish is finally going to come true, and Wolfgang understands. Hero Ray is unhappy about this and questions how everyone can be so calm about it. Gerard tells Kuro Ray that he has lived longer than most, watching his companions and their descendants pass away. He has even cared for their grandchildren on their deathbeds. He tells her that in 1 week, she will understand why he has lived so long. Hero Ray understands, and Gerard mentions that the duel will take place in Ralua Forest. He says it will be the final and greatest battle of his life, and he wants them all to witness it. Shin later thinks about the duel, and Yuzuha approaches him, asking if something is wrong. Shin says everything is fine. Elsewhere, Gerard reflects on how he has always admired Shin. When Shin disappeared, Gerard felt regret and found the world dull without him. He had given up hope that his wish would come true, and he thanks Shin for giving him the chance to fulfill it. Over the next few days, Shin adapts to life in Farnet. Gerard gives him his broken gauntlets to fix, and everyone is surprised by Shin's blacksmithing skills. The scene shifts to Shin returning the repaired gauntlets to Gerard, telling him he can now fight to his heart's content. Gerard thanks Shin and mentions that tomorrow is the day of their duel. Gerard asks Shin if he will return to his world if he finds a way back and if he will leave Schnee behind. Shin says he will go back home because that is why he has been fighting all this time, and he apologizes for it. Gerard says he should be the one apologizing for asking such a tough question. Shin thinks it would be great if there were a way to solve everything at once for him and Schnee. Gerard then reminds him that he used to call himself an opportunist whenever he was in trouble. Shin recalls that back then he wanted everything to go his way and have a happy ending where they all lived happily ever after. Gerard mentions that this is something they will never experience, but he looks forward to tomorrow. Shin agrees. The next day, everyone heads to Ralua Forest. Gerard says he is ready to go. When they arrive, Shin tells everyone to wait on a cliff and asks Schnee to protect them from any stray attacks. Schnee assures him to fight without worry and says she will take care of Gerard. Gerard tells Wolfgang that he is leaving everything in his hands. Wolfgang promises to lead the kingdom well and remember the teachings of the first king. Hero Ray adds that she will become a warrior worthy of the first Beast King's bloodline. Shin and Gerard then leave to fight, and Rajan notes that he hasn't seen the king smile like that in a long time. Hero Ray is worried about the king, and Wolfgang says they should watch him achieve his wishes together. Meanwhile, in the forest, Shin and Gerard begin fighting and exchange blows. Gerard says this reminds him of 500 years ago, and Shin replies that it feels like yesterday to him. As they continue fighting, the others notice that they are on a completely different level. They didn't know the first king was this strong. Schnee says they should be done warming up soon and that their warm-ups are always impressive. Tiara is surprised that this isn't their full power, and asks Schnee if she is as strong as them. Schnee admits she would struggle against Gerard, which makes Tiara realize Schnee is still stronger. Hero Ray says they should witness the battle with their own eyes. Gerard tells Shin that even the techniques he created to fight him are useless, and he says he expected nothing less from his master. Shin tells Gerard to stop holding back, knowing he's stronger than this. Gerard decides to fight at full power, and shifts into his beast mode. He remembers Shin saying he would fight at full power, but without using the titles he earned from defeating the final boss, as relying on such abilities wouldn't be cool. Gerard thinks he would have done the same in Shin's position, but he wants to fight Shin at full power, even if the battle ends quickly. He declares this is the moment his fangs will reach Shin. Shin attacks, but Gerard dodges and tries to counterattack, which Shin blocks. Gerard then prepares a blast attack for Shin, and while Shin deals with it, Gerard launches a flurry of attacks. Shin handles them all and realizes he should also give it his all, seeing Gerard fight at full power. He uses a charged sword strike, and Gerard counters with a blast. The others are surprised, and Schnee mentions it will end soon. Gerard then surprises Shin and lands a blow on him, but it's weak and Gerard falls down. He transforms back into his human form, and Shin says he is impressed that Gerard managed to land a hit on him. Gerard says he's been living for 500 years and his long-awaited wish has finally come true. He asks Shin for a favor as a reward for landing a hit on him. When Shin asks what he wants, Gerard says he knows Shin is still holding back and asks to see his full, unrestrained power. Shin unleashes his full power, and Gerard is amazed, saying he had no idea Shin was this strong. Gerard says his goodbye to Shin, and Shin carries him out of the forest. Hero Ray, Wolfgang, and the others are sad at Gerard's death. But Shin tells them to be proud because Gerard managed to land a hit on a high human, which means he has reached their level. Van notices that the king has a satisfied look on his face, indicating he had no regrets. The others agree, and Kuro-Ray thinks Gerard would laugh at them if he saw them crying, so they stop crying. The scene then shifts to Gerard's funeral, and after the rites, we see Shin sitting alone in a daze. Schnee hugs him and says it looks like Shin is about to disappear again. She says she can do anything for him and asks him to tell her if he needs anything. Shin acknowledges this and mentions that he knows it's what Gerard wanted. He accepted it and fought him, but it still hurts to lose a friend. Schnee tells him he has fulfilled his duty, and now he can cry all he wants. Shin then cries. The scene then shifts to Shin and the girls in town. Shin asks them why they are dressed the way they are. They explain that, since elves stand out too much, they have disguised themselves as beast girls. SHNI recalls that Shin referred to these outfits as cosplay items. She mentions that they are quite useful, as they can conceal the traits of one's species. And Shin thinks to himself that he only created them for fun. SHNI then asks Shin how she looks in this getup, and Shin tells her that she looks great. Embarrassed by the compliment, SHNI suggests that they should go see SH Wade. Shin reflects on the unexpected opportunity to see SH Wade here and explains that Kalmont is an allied nation of Barnet. His former supporting character, SH Wade the High Dragnir, will be representing them at the funeral. The scene transitions to Shin and the others arriving at the place where representatives from other nations have gathered. On the way to meet SH Wade, Shin wonders if he is also a ruler like Jared. Schnee clarifies that SH Wade was the first emperor of the Dragon Empire, but has since cut ties with the imperial family. Ever since Kilmont stabilized, he has been living at his leisure, and Shin is surprised that the people have accepted this. Schnee further explains that the second and current emperor was supposed to be the first, but he was injured during the founding of the nation. And Shin realizes that SH Wade was a stand-in. They then meet SH Wade's servant, who tells them to wait in a room. Wolfgang then announces that he will take his leave, as he has a meeting to attend, and he tells Shin to let Kuro-Ray know if he needs anything. Afterward, SH Wade arrives in the room to meet Shin, and once his servant leaves, he bows deeply to his master. SH Wade expresses his delight at Shin's return and declares his intent to serve him once again. Shin recalls that this is typical behavior for SH Wade and suggests they take things easy since it has been a long time since they last met. SH Wade hesitates initially, but notices SHNI also speaking casually to Shin, realizing that the dynamics have changed. He then relaxes, and Shin recounts the story of Gerard's passing. SH Wade is pleased to hear that Gerard passed away content, and asks Shin about his future plans. Shin explains that he has exhausted the resources of the local library and plans to visit the sacred place next. SH Wade states that he will return to Kilmont first and then join Shin. Shin remarks that it's been a while since they last teamed up and suggests they use telepathy to stay in touch. He then prepares to leave but remembers something important. Shin gives SH Wade his personal weapon, Najizuki. SH Wade takes the spear, noting that it has been a long time since he last held it and that it seems more powerful than before. Shin tells SH Wade that he performed some maintenance on the weapon and managed to make it 5 times stronger. SH Wade is astonished at Shin's growth and abilities over such a short period. The scene then transitions to Shin and his companions at the guild, where Shin contemplates advancing his adventurer rank to see he decides to take on a goblin extermination quest. Kuro-Ray expresses her desire to join Shin on this quest. Shin asks if she is certain, and she confirms, explaining that she will handle her remaining tasks upon her return. Shin inquires about these tasks, and learns that she is assigned to investigate Ralua Forest, where he previously fought Gerard. She needs to ensure the forest is recovering properly. Shin asks if he can accompany her, and she agrees. The scene cuts to them facing goblins. They each take out a goblin, successfully completing their quest. They then proceed to Ralua Forest, observing that it has already returned to its normal state. They examine the regenerated trees and search for anything unnatural. After completing their investigation, they return to the guild to collect their reward. The guild receptionist informs Shin that she has a message for him from Barlux, the guild master of the Beorlicht branch. Upon reading the letter, Shin learns that he has been summoned by the palace in Beorlicht. The letter urges him to head there as soon as possible. Tiara wonders why the palace is interested in Shin, but Shin has no idea. He recalls the sword he sent flying and thinks he might need to address this issue before focusing on his rank. Tiara and Schnee offer to accompany him, while Kuro-Ray expresses her wish to join but explains that she cannot leave the country. Shin assures her that it's alright and mentions that he wants to give something to Wolfgang before departing. He asks Kuro-Ray to inform him when Wolfgang is available. Kuro-Ray agrees, and the scene transitions to Shin meeting Wolfgang at night. Wolfgang inquires about the purpose of Shin's visit, and Shin explains that he needs to leave for Beorlicht immediately. Shin hands Wolfgang Gerard's gauntlets, explaining that he has already transferred ownership. He tells Wolfgang that he can pass them on to whomever he chooses. Wolfgang, surprised, mentions that he thought the gauntlets were destroyed in battle. Shin reveals that he repaired them, fulfilling Gerard's request to give them to Wolfgang once the battle was over. He encourages Wolfgang to check them out. Celica remarks that she has never seen Shin speaking with a male before, to which Shin responds that he did go on a mission with Wilhelm. This revelation causes everyone in the guild to fall silent, and Shin is puzzled by their reaction. Celica explains that Wilhelm rarely forms parties, and that his combat rank is S, adding that there are many rumors about him. People find Wilhelm unapproachable, but Shin insists that he is simply misunderstood. Cecilia agrees, and then Celica informs Shin that the guildmaster is ready to see him. The scene shifts to Shin meeting the guildmaster, who introduces him to Arad, a mage. Arad is responsible for appraising gems for the guild and has assessed the skull-face gem that Shin brought in. Barlux, the guildmaster, then informs Shin that he has been summoned by the palace, prompting Shin to wonder why. Before explaining, Arad asks Shin if he is aware of a sword that flew into the palace some time ago. Shin acknowledges that he has heard about it. Arad elaborates, describing the sword as a massive white blade that crashed into the bedroom of the second princess, causing quite a commotion. Fortunately, no one was hurt. However, the sword itself has become an issue because its elemental enchantments and base materials are exceptionally impressive, making it comparable to the king's royal sword. Shin finds this information remarkable. Arad continues, explaining that the gem from the skullface that Shin defeated also contained powerful mana, indicating it was quite high level. Realizing this, Shin deduces that the palace already knows he was responsible for the incident, and wonders how they figured it out. Arad elaborates that the palace discovered the gem, and as its appraiser, he was asked to examine the sword as well. He found traces of mana on the sword that matched the mana from the gem. By following this trail, they identified Shin as the one who brought the gem, leading to his summons. Barlux explains that under these circumstances, the guild couldn't keep Shin's secret. Shin acknowledges that it's understandable, given how much the palace already knew, making it impossible to deceive them. Barlux reassures him that the situation isn't dire, noting that Shin had a letter of introduction from the Moon Sanctum and that he was specifically summoned by the second princess. The incident piqued her interest in him, and Shin wonders if she plans to hold him accountable for injuring royalty. Barlux assures him that he won't be punished. He explains that since the princess has experience in slaying Skullface, she convinced everyone that Shin had no choice but to use his full strength in the situation. Shin wonders what the princess wants from him, but Barlux admits he doesn't know. The scene then shifts to Shin discussing the situation with Tiara, Shni, and Yuzua. Shni speculates that the palace might want to press Shin into their service, or arrange a marriage with an important noble. She explains that a nation's power is linked to its high-ranking chosen ones, so they might aggressively try to recruit him. Hearing this, Shin feels reluctant about going. Shni reassures him that he can refuse their offer if he wishes. She suggests that he could explain that his current party would suffer greatly without him. Shin acknowledges the possibility of a marriage proposal, and realizes he needs a valid reason to turn it down. Shni offers to pretend to be his fiancé, and, depending on the circumstances, he could also claim he is betrothed to Tiara. Yuzua then chimes in, saying she also wants to be Shin's fiancé. Shin quickly clarifies that they are only pretending, explaining that he cannot actually do that. Yuzua questions whether Shin will mate with Shni, and he firmly states that he will not. The next day, the scene shifts to Shin arriving at the castle. A guard at the gate retrieves his escort, and a soldier named Godress comes to guide Shin to the princess's room. Shin notices that Godress has a level of 188. Upon entering the room, the princess introduces herself to him. Shin thanks the princess for inviting him, but she quickly tells him he doesn't need to be so formal. Godress, her escort, objects, stating it's not proper for her to be so informal with someone she just met. The princess insists that she doesn't want to create any barriers between them. Shin then asks why he was summoned. In response, Ryan shows him a sword and asks if he recognizes it. Shin identifies it as the weapon wielded by the skull face he defeated. She comments on the skull face's strength, and Shin confirms, mentioning that his own weapon was destroyed in the battle. Ryan explains that Shin is different from most adventurers who suddenly distinguish themselves and are called chosen ones. When someone proves to be particularly powerful, they are typically summoned to the palace. She adds that some have used this opportunity to plot assassinations, and she initially suspected Shin might do the same, but she now knows he won't. Shin expresses his confusion, noting he hasn't done anything to clear himself of suspicion. Ryan says she's relying on her instincts, revealing she has an intuition skill that has never been wrong. Shin silently questions this, wondering if her skill enhances her woman's intuition. Godress adds that a key factor in their decision was the letter from the Moon Sanctum that Shin carried. Shin then asks what the princess wants from him. To his surprise, Ryan declares that she wants him to fight her. Just as Shin is taken aback by this request, the scene shifts to a shadowy figure attacking someone elsewhere. Godrez advises the princess to address government service first, but she insists that testing Shin's strength is the priority. Godrez suggests she should phrase it more diplomatically, reminding her that princesses shouldn't challenge people to battle so bluntly. Rian, the princess, counters that her sister handles the ladylike duty and instructs Shin to follow her. They proceed to a room with a teleportation point, prompting Shin to ask about their destination. Rian reveals they are heading to a place where they can fight freely, and they teleport. Upon arrival, Shin notices an arena-like setting. Rian explains that this is a training ground for battles between chosen ones. She adds that the teleportation points are remnants of pre-Dusk of Prosperity technology, whose full purpose remains unknown. Shin comments on the peculiarity of having teleportation points despite teleportation being lost magic, and Rian declares it's time to begin, instructing Shin to select a weapon. Both Shin and Rian choose their weapons, and before the fight starts, Shin then lowers his stats to match Rian's level, and they engage in another sword duel. They test each other's strength, both retreating after the initial clash. Rian urges Shin to use his skills, prompting him to activate his Flashing Vigor skill. Rian mirrors his action, and Godrez observes that their enhancements are nearly identical. Now, only their inherent abilities differentiate them. Shin attempts an attack, but Rian strikes first, forcing him to dodge. Realizing he would have been seriously hurt if he hadn't dodged, Shin acknowledges their similar fighting styles and reaction speeds. Shin remarks that this duel won't be easily resolved and suggests they stop. Though Rian wishes to continue, Shin points out that her sword has reached its limit. Godrez compliments Shin's abilities, noting they match the princess's and his reaction speed is impressive. Rian agrees not to push further and ends the duel. As someone tries to enter the room with the teleportation point, back in the arena, Rian asks Shin if he is interested in joining them. Shin declines, and Rian responds that she can't offer him a general's position but can promise him a respectable status. Shin appreciates the offer and inquires about the Sword of the Skull Face, curious why she didn't use it during the test. Rian explains that in their kingdom, it is customary for a man to give a woman a sword when proposing marriage. The woman can then use it to defend herself or cut down the man if he is unfaithful. Shin finds this tradition a bit extreme, but Rian reassures him that it is mostly symbolic nowadays. Ryan then states that she would like to consider this sword as a gift from Shin to her. Shin points out that this would imply he proposed to her. Ryan acknowledges this, but Shin explains that the sword ended up in her room purely by accident. Ryan assures him that she won't force the matter. Godrez then reveals that some people are plotting to leverage this incident to arrest Shin as a criminal, aiming to make him repay the kingdom gradually through service. Shin realizes the sword could have easily killed someone, even though it wasn't intentional. The princess suggests treating the sword as a tribute, which would avoid the implication of a marriage proposal while still providing her with a powerful weapon. Ryan offers to compensate Shin for the blade from her own treasury, acknowledging that she stands to gain more from this agreement but still asking to keep the sword. Shin agrees, stating that he just wants to continue working as an adventurer. Instead of money, he requests access to the restricted zone of the magical library. Ryan asks if this is truly all he wants, as the sword is valuable enough for him to live comfortably for the rest of his life. Shin affirms that it is, emphasizing that information is more valuable to him at the moment. The princess agrees, mentioning that she has already used the sword a few times and it is starting to feel right in her hand. Shin then realizes that the princess intended to take the sword from the beginning. The three of them return to the castle, where they notice the guards at the gate have been incapacitated. Inside, they find Cardinal Grail in the room. Shin observes that Grail has been afflicted with charm and confusion spells. Suddenly, Grail casts a spell to teleport Shin and Rian out of the room. Shin and Rian find themselves in an unfamiliar place, and Rian recognizes it as the Holy Land of Kalkia. She wonders if they are the only ones who were teleported. Shin confirms that he can't sense anyone else nearby. Rian is shocked that a powerful priest like Grail lost his mind and questions how this could have happened. Shin suggests they should find a way out first and asks if she can use telepathy. She explains that she isn't currently in a party with anyone, so Shin decides to contact his own party. He asks if she knows of any nearby cities. Rian mentions that the walled city of Valmer is close by. Just then, Shni contacts Shin telepathically, frantically asking where he is. He reassures her to calm down and assures her he is fine, explaining the situation. Shni was worried when his presence suddenly vanished, fearing he had left again, and asks what happened. Shin tells her everything, including the possibility that someone is controlling Cardinal Grail. Schnee remarks that mind-affecting skills are taboo and even royals face execution if caught using them. Shin speculates that someone must be working from the shadows. He mentions he could teleport them out, but the princess and her people wouldn't let him go if he used lost magic. He asks Schnee to handle things for him, and Schnee assures him he can count on her. Tiara, overhearing, asks Schnee if Shin is alright, and she confirms that he is fine. Tiara is relieved to hear that Shin is safe. Schnee tells her they have urgent business, and that Tiara will accompany her to the palace. On the way, Schnee explains that Shin has encountered some trouble involving a demon. Tiara recalls that demons are monsters born from miasma, and Schnee elaborates that demons are beings who cause immense suffering. Schnee explains that the main difference between demons and other monsters is their empowerment within miasma, and their ability to disguise themselves as other creatures. Monsters afflicted by demonic miasma become indiscriminate attackers, and the more humanoid a demon is, the more powerful and intelligent they are. Demons are ranked by power, and since this one used skills to control a person, it must be a relatively intelligent demon of Count class, with a level between 300 and 400. Tiara is astonished that a mid-rank demon can have such a high level, noting that her level isn't even half of the demon's lowest level. Schnee reassures her that this isn't an issue, as she is only there to observe today. Upon arriving at the palace, Schnee casts a concealment spell to hide herself and Tiara. Tiara realizes they are about to sneak in. Schnee then jumps over the palace wall with Tiara, and they stealthily enter the palace. As they proceed, Tiara is amazed that the soldiers cannot see them despite being in close proximity. She asks Schnee where they are headed. Schnee informs Tiara that they are heading to the dungeon. Upon arrival, they find a cell and Schnee tells Tiara that the demon has already been captured. She puts the guards outside the cell to sleep and opens the cell door. Seeing the gate open, Cardinal Greril wonders who is there, and Schnee reveals herself. Schnee explains that charm and confusion spells were cast on the cardinal, and Greril, confused, states that he doesn't remember anything about the spells being cast on him. Schnee explains that having two mind-affecting conditions can cause memory loss and assures him not to worry, as the individuals who were teleported are safe and will return soon. Greril is relieved to hear this. Schnee then attempts to dispel the status effects on him. As she does, the demon attacks her, but she counters the attack effortlessly. The demon, named Magnamuk, has a level of 423. Schnee notes that the demon's intelligence likely comes from having a name, and Magnamuk realizes she is Schnee Razor. Schnee remarks that it has been 500 years since she last fought a demon, and comments on their unsightly appearance. Magnamuk accuses Schnee of always getting in their way and launches another attack, which she counters once more. The demon attacks again, but Schnee skillfully uses dual wielding to counter him. Magnamuk, puzzled, asks why she is protecting the human. Schnee mentions that it would be a shame to let Greril die over false charges, and allowing a demon to run amok would disgrace the Moon Sanctum. The demon recalls that the Moon Sanctum was created by the High Human and remarks that those like him defeated many demons in the past, but that era is over. The warriors have long forsaken this world, leaving people divided and corruption spreading. He asserts that the age of men is ending and invites Schnee to join them. Schnee firmly declines, and the demon questions why she is so determined to oppose them, especially since she was abandoned by her master. He reminds her that it has been a long time since the High Human left and insists that he will never return. He wonders if she harbors any resentment toward those who abandoned her. Schnee, surprised by his ignorance, states that she would have been angry hearing all this before, but now his timing is unfortunate. Drawing her blade, Blue Moon, she swiftly slays the demon. In his final moments, the demon realizes that the High Human has returned. Afterwards, Schnee and the others head to the king's meeting room. The king is surprised to see Schnee and asks what she is doing there. The princess, noticing Greril, is puzzled since he was supposed to be in the dungeon. Schnee explains everything about the demon. The king is shocked to learn that the enemies of humans, as written in history books, are still active. Godras comments on the danger of demons using mind-affecting skills, and the princess expresses hope that her magic can be used to resist them. Schnee then shares some good news, revealing that the two who were teleported are safe, much to everyone's relief. Greril apologizes for the trouble he caused, but the king reassures him that it's not his fault, as he was under compulsion. The king hopes that Greril will continue to serve as their liaison with the church, and Greril agrees. Schnee advises the king to keep the information under control to prevent public panic. The king asks about her plans, and Schnee mentions that she has somewhere she must go, leaving with Tiara. Afterward, Tiara asks Schnee about their next steps. Schnee says they will head to the walled city of Valmer to meet Shin. Tiara points out that Shin has their wagon and wonders if they will need to buy a new one, but Schnee replies that they will run there. The scene then cuts to them running out of the city. Tiara is riding Shimmer, and they make their way to Shin as quickly as possible. Afterwards, Shin asks Ryan if she knows anything about the Holy Land. She explains that Holy Lands are cities that fell during the dusk of prosperity, and this is her first time entering one. She mentions that it typically takes several chosen ones to defeat the monsters that appear here. Realizing this, Shin thinks they will need weapons. The princess feels fortunate to have been teleported with the skull-faced sword and wonders what Shin will do. Shin reassures her not to worry, but he is concerned about revealing his true strength. He knows that if the princess discovers he can use dozens of skills, she will never let him leave. However, escaping without using his skills seems nearly impossible. The princess explains that the holy city of Kalkia has gates in the 4 cardinal directions. Her people entered through the south gate during their inspection. Near that gate is a small door leading to a device for opening and closing the gates. Shin suggests they should take a shortcut to that gate and attempts to climb the walls. Shin quickly realizes that he cannot climb the walls and that jumping above them teleports him back to his starting point. After some thought, he finds an orb and deduces why this is happening. He explains to Ryan that the entire city is a dungeon, operating differently from typical dungeons. They can only reach the exit by following a set route, which is why climbing the walls is ineffective. Shin tells Ryan they will have to follow the orbs to escape. He notes that he can't see any traps, so they will have to deal with the monsters that appear. Ryan expresses relief that Shin teleported with her, admitting it would have been hard for her to figure this out on her own. Shin expresses his happiness to be of help and explains that the orb can teleport them to the next location. He assures Ryan that he will go ahead and return if the area is clear. Shin then teleports and quickly comes back, informing Ryan that the orb teleports them a bit ahead and the area is safe. Ryan apologizes for making him do such a dangerous task, but Shin insists that he couldn't allow a princess to teleport first. He thinks to himself that he should be able to instantly slaughter any monsters that appear if he isn't being watched. The two of them then teleport together, and Shin notices a monster in the distance. As they approach, Shin identifies the creature as a Giliwei Eye, a level 531 monster. He warns Ryan that it can use earth and wind magic and moves unpredictably. The monster attacks with wind magic, which Shin counters. Ryan follows up with an attack, and Shin delivers the finishing blow. Shin tells Ryan that her skull-faced sword is enchanted with light, which is the Giliwei Eye's weakness. Ryan then asks about Shin's sword, and he reveals it is a mid-tier mythic arm called Kakura. Ryan is amazed that Shin had been hiding such an impressive weapon, and Shin remarks that everyone should keep a few cards up their sleeve. Ryan becomes even more interested in Shin, and he suddenly senses 20 more monsters. He tells Ryan that monsters typically don't leave their positions in a dungeon, but advises caution nonetheless. Ryan agrees that they should avoid as much danger as possible, and Shin finds it frustrating that he can't fully use his skills. They use another orb to move to the next location, and after some exploration, they come across a grizzly. Shin thinks the grizzly is a troublesome monster, but Ryan dismisses it as an easy-to-defeat slime and charges at it. However, the slime captures her. Shin quickly frees her, and Ryan apologizes for her carelessness. Shin then explains that grizzlies are immune to bludgeoning, slashing, and weak attacks. They are also quite intelligent and will give chase. Therefore, they need to defeat it right here. Shin attacks the monster with a fire spell, exposing its core, which Ryan then destroys. Shin commends her for this, and Ryan notices he is becoming more casual with her. She states that she doesn't mind this and tells him not to hold himself back. Shin replies that it's better to be proper, reminding her that this arrangement is only until they escape the labyrinth. Ryan agrees and notes that Shin keeps looking away from her. She asks him why, and he awkwardly admits that her attire is revealing. Embarrassed, she asks if he saw anything, and Shin assures her he didn't. He then gives her something to wear, and she marvels at his preparedness. She wonders if he has something baggier since the garment is tied around the chest, and Shin is momentarily distracted by this. Afterward, he asks Ryan if she can use magic. She replies that she can only cast a few beginner-level spells, which would be useless against the monsters in the Holy Land. Shin agrees and telepathically asks Shni if it would be alright to teach the princess an imitation enchantment. Shni, understanding the emergency, reluctantly agrees, saying he has no choice but to teach her for self-defense. Shin then informs the princess that he will teach her some enchantment techniques and explains what she needs to do. Ryan follows his instructions and successfully enchants her sword with a fire spell. She tests it by cutting a stone, which burns upon contact. Shin explains to Ryan that what he taught her is an imitation enchantment, essentially a forgery of a real fire enchantment. While it can quickly destroy any non-legendary weapon, it is useful when they can't utilize specialized skills. Ryan expresses concern about learning such a valuable skill, wondering if it was right for Shin to teach her. Shin reassures her, stating that if more people knew these skills, fewer would fall victim to monsters. Appreciative but slightly troubled, Ryan remarks that she has done nothing but take from Shin between the enchantment and the sword. Shin encourages her to be glad she has gained useful information, but Ryan admits she dislikes taking without giving in return. Shin then requests something from her in exchange, to protect her kingdom and its people as royalty. She agrees, and Shin feels relieved that he has managed to keep her from discovering the truth, that imitation enchantments work due to a bug in the game. He can't bring himself to tell her this, especially when she looks at him with such sincerity. As they continue, they come across something resembling an egg. Shin feels as if he is being drawn in by some presence within the dungeon, and he wonders what it could be. Ryan, however, feels nothing unusual. Shin suggests they keep moving forward. Approaching the egg-like object, Shin speculates whether it might be a monster egg. Ryan tells Shin it can't be a monster egg, as monster eggs are usually wrapped in concentrated mana. She admits she has never seen anything like this. Shin speculates it must not be an ordinary monster, and then the creature hatches from its shell. It's a griffin, and Shin identifies it as an ice-type monster. The griffin immediately attacks them, forcing Shin and Ryan to dodge. Shin thinks this is absurd and Ryan asks what they should do. Shin suggests that getting close to the griffin will be challenging, so he plans to act as a decoy while she strikes from behind. Ryan worries if he'll be alright, but Shin assures her he'll manage. Executing their plan, the griffin focuses on attacking Shin, who skillfully dodges all its attacks. Using his trick throw skill, Shin manages to hit the griffin, creating an opening for Ryan to strike as well. The griffin retaliates by hitting Ryan with its wings, but Shin finishes the attack with a fire spell. He hopes this will be enough, but the griffin astonishingly heals itself completely and resumes its attack. Realizing the griffin's regenerative abilities, Shin and Ryan decide to flee. Ryan anxiously asks how they can defeat it. Shin instructs her to find the device to open the gate while he keeps the griffin occupied. He suggests that the monster is likely created by magic, and the spell causing its regeneration might be linked to the opening mechanism. Ryan agrees to locate the gate mechanism, thinking they might immobilize the monster temporarily and escape. Shin warns that the griffin might chase them even outside the dungeon, but they'll deal with that later. Ryan expresses concern for his safety, and Shin reassures her that he'll be fine. They part ways, and Shin, determined, approaches the griffin and removes his limiter. In a single swift strike, he decapitates the griffin. Despite this, the griffin regenerates yet again. Shin thinks to himself that he is still unsure how much of his power he can safely unleash in this world. He decides that this griffin will make a good test subject. Meanwhile, Ryan locates the gate mechanism. Shin continues battling the griffin, having defeated it 30 times already, but it keeps regenerating. He considers sealing it since it recovers from both physical and magical damage. Noticing a white sphere inside the griffin, he senses the same pull he felt earlier. Shin attacks the sphere, but it absorbs his strike. Deciding to charge in, he is suddenly enveloped by a golden light, and the pulling sensation vanishes. He attacks the griffin again and realizes it has stopped regenerating. Dodging its next attack, he obliterates the griffin with a powerful fire strike. The golden light fades just as Ryan arrives. She asks where the griffin is, and Shin tells her he has defeated it without a trace. They then head to the exit and successfully leave the labyrinth. Shin informs Ryan that they are supposed to meet his friends in Valmer. Ryan mentions that they should head towards the mountains to reach Valmer. Afterward, Shin contacts Shni, informing her that he has safely escaped the Holy Land and will be camping with the princess. Shni, feeling a twinge of jealousy, tells Shin she isn't jealous before cutting the telepathy. She then urges Shimmer to move faster, and they continue towards Shin. The scene shifts to Shin and Ryan camping outside. Shin serves Ryan some tea, creating a peaceful moment amidst their adventure. Seeing this, Ryan thinks that Shin is incredibly well prepared, noting that he had clothes, a tent, and even food ready. Shin explains that he was already set to hit the road when she summoned him, and with an item box, traveling light is easy. Hearing about his item box, Ryan wishes her kingdom had someone as capable as Shin. However, Shin firmly declines her request. She attempts to charm him into changing his mind, but he remains resolute. Ryan thinks to herself that Shin is unusually straightforward with her and mentions that she doesn't dislike this. She explains that, as royalty, she is used to everyone treating her with utmost respect, so she enjoys conversing with someone like Shin once in a while. This suits her much better, and Shin wonders if she is not this frank with her family. Ryan tells him that it's been a long time since she enjoyed her family's company, and a part of her is searching for someone to replace that connection. Shin reassures her that he doesn't mind talking to her whenever she wants, and she snuggles up to him. He wonders what she is doing, and she asks him to let her stay like this for a while. Shin allows it, and the two of them sit together quietly for some time. The next morning, they discover a gigantic horde of monsters heading towards Valmer. Rion fears this might signal the beginning of a flood, a term used when magicals accumulate in a sacred land, transforming into monsters that roam freely. Observing that the horde mainly consists of low-level creatures, Shin is puzzled as to why they are heading towards Valmer. The princess explains that the area around the sacred land is protected by the Miss Garuda. The only way to bypass this protection is by passing through Valmer, which is why the city is heavily fortified to act as a barrier against these floods. The constant attacks on the territory cause severe casualties among the local population, weakening them more with each attack. A flood of this magnitude could spell calamity for the area. To be certain, Shin considers hurrying Schnee. Since there's still time before the horde arrives, he contemplates joining Valmer's guard, a decision Rion agrees with. Upon arrival, they assess that they still have a few days to prepare the defenses. The princess says she will meet with the local lord and asks Shin to report the horde to the Adventurers Guild to unite the adventurers and the army on the castle walls. At the guild, the blacksmith is received by the guild master, Baron Lacht, who is then alerted about the horde marching from the sacred land Kalkia, and that it should reach Valmer in a few days. On the mission to unite the city's forces against the enemy, an adventurer's companion is in contact with the local leader. Thus, Baron asks his elven assistant Eliza to contact the representatives of each guild, while Shin makes it clear that he will help. After returning to the streets, Shin feels he should go back to Rion. But a sign reading Malin catches his eye as he swears he sees something familiar. Just then, Schnee contacts him, informing that she will arrive in Valmer soon. Shin asks Schnee to notify the local chief and the guildmaster that he will be joining the city's resistance. Additionally, he inquires if she knows anything about a place called Meow Land, a curious shop he found nearby. Unfortunately, she has no idea what it means. As Shin continues, he suddenly encounters Barrett, a support character of a friend of his from the game. Barrett, an elf, is overjoyed at the reunion. Shin didn't expect this but considers it makes sense due to Schnee's arrival. The two soon join for tea, and the blacksmith mentions that he will be on the castle walls when the invasion begins. Barrett asks if he couldn't have simply annihilated the entire horde. Shin explains that he couldn't display his full strength in front of the second princess of Bearlick. The elf, understanding that superior humans are exalted as gods, imagines the princess might come with a marriage proposal if she witnessed all of Shin's power. Shin then mentions that Rion has already shown interest in him. Thus, he plans to join the local forces to blend in and mask his abilities. Changing the subject, Shin insists on knowing more about the Meow Land shop. Barrett reveals that it belongs to Shin's friend Hibanko. Shin is quite surprised to learn that this person is in this world, so Barrett adds that, besides Hibanko, Shadow and Holly are also here. Incredulous, Shin had sworn that the three died in the death game. Barrett then explains that there is a list of players in this world for Shin to see. Upon checking it, Shin realizes that all the players listed had been involved with him in some way. Barrett also hands over a list of individuals identified as player executioners, known as player killers, the infamous PKs. Shin recalls that these characters, the player killers, were responsible for killing many of his friends during the death game. These troublemakers killed for fun. Barrett explains that when the players were first discovered in this world, it was Schnee who insisted that the PKs be hunted down. Since Shin was never informed of this, the elf considers this omission an act of betrayal by Schnee for not informing her master of something so important. Thus, Barrett believes a punishment is justified. Shin feels uneasy and asserts that his servant would never commit such a betrayal, though the fact she claimed not to know about Meow Land leaves him in considerable doubt. Nevertheless, Barrett says he was just joking as he doesn't believe it's in Schnee's nature to commit such a grave act. With that said, Barrett informs Shin that he needs to leave to prepare for the battle. Confused, Shin asks if Barrett too will fight, as he was never known for his sword skills. However, Barrett explains that he will stock up on food because he plans to make money after Shin drives the invaders away. Embarrassed, Shin recalls that this elf was configured to love money more than his own mother. Walking through the streets of Valmer, Shin discovers that flood hordes usually come with a powerful individual among the weaker ones. Eventually, Tierra arrives with Yuzuha and Scintillante. Shin asks where Schnee is, and her servant explains that she went to handle some matters upon arrival. But since she's famous here, she won't be free anytime soon. Sometime later, Schnee Rizar explains that she will still meet the Chosen Ones at the local lord's castle, as everyone will have to work together. While the elf is speaking, Shin can't help but think about what Barrett had said earlier regarding the supposed betrayal, even though he claimed it was a joke. Upon arriving at the castle, Tierra and her companions are warmly welcomed by Toro Yaxfair, the Lord of Valmer. He informs them that there isn't much time until the horde arrives, so he has decided that the Chosen Ones will stay outside Valmer with knights in the rear. Once within attack range, the second squadron led by Schnee will strike with wide area magic. Meanwhile, the first squadron and the knights will handle any monsters that get through. When Schnee mentions she will personally instruct the army's knights, Tiara comments that she pities these people because her mistress is a demon when it comes to training. Schnee makes a point of mentioning that her servant will also be part of the exercises. A few days later, even with the passage of time, the monsters do not appear on the borders of Valmir. Before the local lord, Shin considers that they might have disappeared completely, as it is one of the effects of the flood. Schnee mentions that she had experienced this once before, and that this phenomenon makes the monsters in the area disappear, only to reappear shortly after as a black wave. Toro responded that he didn't know about this sort of thing, prompting Shin to reflect that the reason is obvious. In the game, there are no records of it. Schnee advised everyone to be careful, as surely an extremely powerful individual would be amid that gigantic flood. Later, beside Tiara, who was worn out from yet another training session, Schnee was asked by her master if she had used large-scale spells in guild battles since he disappeared. She explained that she had always managed to resolve situations with magic. With that said, Shin thought it best to use very powerful abilities only in the initial attack. Next, the blacksmith began preparations for the battle, updating his disguises and enhancing his equipment. In the early morning in Valmir, the troops stood guard alongside the chosen ones gathering outside the castle. Shin questioned whether it was a good idea for the Princess of Berelic to participate in the defense. However, Rion was eager to test the sword she had received from the blacksmith. Afterwards, Schnee mentioned that she wanted to talk about something with Shin once this battle was over. Speaking of which, the hordes approached, and the elf conjured the Blue Mediator, a spell so powerful that it devastated the enemies instantly. With this, the city's defense went on high alert. Despite the heavy losses inflicted by the Blue Mediator, the opposing troops kept emerging, leading Shin to conclude that this was indeed no ordinary flood. This time, he dealt with the second wave of skeleton warriors, using his Amber Wave and Hermita Phoenix to finish them off. Afterward, Shin said he needed to conserve his mana for later, so Rion prepared the troops to advance. Suddenly, everyone was surprised by a flaming sphere that devastated another portion of the enemies. It was Tiara, standing atop the wall, overjoyed to realize that the bow adjusted by Shin was powerful to the last string. Next, Rion charged at the monstrous forces, easily defeating most of them with her exceptional skill as the Princess of Berelic. However, not all of the monsters were weak. One offered significant resistance, causing her to struggle. Tiara tried to help but realized she was out of mana after her previous powerful shot. Wilhelm Avis then emerged in the middle of the battle to contain the most powerful enemy, with Lasha appearing on the wall to restore Tiara's mana. In a sequence of coordinated attacks, Rion eliminated the adversary. Wilhelm explained that he had come following a request for assistance from the guild, and Millie had begged him to help Shin. He didn't think Shin, as a superior human, would have much difficulty handling the problem. Ahead of the defensive line, Shin spotted a group of human scouts being pursued by monsters. Disguised in samurai armor, he crushed the first creature and positioned himself in front of the scouts. When asked who he was, Shin pretended his name was Red and told the soldiers to leave because the weapon he was about to use could kill them as well. Hearing the grotesque laughter of the cursed scythe from afar, Wilhelm feared it would drain all life around it with its thirst for blood. Then, the demon leader of the flood appeared, striking all the frontline soldiers with a power that affected the entire army's mind. Since Shin, as a superior human, was immune to such a trick, he deactivated his limit and cut the demon in half with his scythe. With that, all the monsters were exterminated without the city suffering any casualties. The next day, Shin and Tiara were fed up with having to be part of the victory celebration, so Schnee asked them to make an effort because it was a local tradition. Seeing how beautiful the elf was, Shin promised to cheer up, even though he didn't know how to handle such a fancy environment. Meanwhile, Wilhelm and Lasha were smarter and had escaped the party. There was nothing Shin could do now, so he took the arms of the two ladies and walked across the hall, embarrassed by the attention he was drawing. Suddenly, Rion appeared, waving to the adventurer. Schnee asked if something had happened between him and the princess. In his defense, Shin argued that the woman was only interested in his equipment, which didn't seem to improve the situation. Jealous, the elf walked away, so Tiara took the opportunity to ask the princess for some stories about the previous day's battle, leaving Shin free to get a drink with Schnee. Upon reuniting with the boy, the elf sincerely lamented not being his fiancé, and admitted that she hadn't told him about other PK players in this world. She hid this so her friend wouldn't become the cold and distant Shin from before. Unfortunately, she felt she couldn't bear to live like she had previously, and began to cry. Without hesitation, Shin pulled the elf into a hug, saying how important she had been in this world where he knew no one. Amid the sea of strangers, Schnee was his sister, his safe harbor. For this reason, he never thought of punishing her for hiding that fact. Taking advantage of the moment, the elf asked if the boy still loved Marino, and he honestly confessed that his feelings hadn't changed. Even so, Schnee kissed Shin and said she would not give up on her love for him, and that wouldn't change even if he returned to his original world. After that, while Schnee and Rion exchanged sharp looks, Shin reflected that he still didn't know how to return to his world and was also worried about the PKs he had encountered in the past. However, since the players he thought were dead were alive, he realized this adventure was far from over. This brings an end to our anime. If you enjoyed it, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more anime recaps.